The magic of Doctor Who is nothing is what it appears to be. The police box is not a police box. The Doctor is not an old human being. Susan is not a school child. Running through Doctor Who is the thing is, look at life. There's more to life than you think. Life is not straightforward. To get the most out of life, you need to dig a bit deeper. So I think that's part of the magic of it.
Time for Type 40 Live, your live stream Doctor Who show materialising here on the Spacebook channel, whatever time stream or time zone you're joining us from. A big welcome echoing from within from within the void here. Yes, this is Type 40 Live hitting your screen in real time with our brand of interdimensional content and conversation here on YouTube and Facebook and across all major podcatchers too, and the minor ones. We'll catch them all eventually. We'll catch them all. Yes, as ever, we're in front of a live chat full of friends, fans and companions just like you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is where we celebrate the world's longest running, best loved sci-fi and fantasy TV show and the whole Whoniverse around it, both on and off screen. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks. Welcome back. And whoever you are, we'll get to you in a moment, I promise. But yeah, keep the comments coming. Keep coming in. Keep filling up. There's plenty of room in this old girl. As always, we're streaming over to YouTube and Facebook. And if you want to join in, you want to get on the show and get your comments read out by the panel and interact with us, you've got to drop us a comment, but hit the little blue link if you're over there on Facebook, and that will just let Facebook know who you are. Facebook tells StreamYard, StreamYard tells us. We all get on first name terms and pile into the console room for a big old geek out about one Doctor Who story in particular this time. One 4-part story that's filled to the brim with all manner of things, with sights, with sounds, with quotes, and with doctors too. This is where the world's longest running sci-fi show meets the universe of common sense, and where the guilty pleasures simply don't exist, and there's no dive that's too deep. We did one of these anniversary shows late last year on the 20th anniversary story, and we always intended on coming back for more to focus on another special time and space from the past. Where else but the three doctors, and the domain of Omega awaits. But before we get into there, I've dispatched some of those big space bogies, the gel gars, to escort my pals here onto the panel this time. Who's first? Who've they managed to get hold of first and wrangle in? Oh, I see. Now, I suspect this guy, I reckon he's done a few miles on back in the 70s. I bet he did a few miles on a space hopper in his time. Is that, what do you think, Ian David Dears? Do you remember the space hoppers? Did you have one of those?
I do. I remember them. But they did your backing, didn't they? If you were on it too long.
But, yeah. I'm not old enough, mate. I can't remember them.
Of course you can't. Of course you can't. I've never been on one though, but I've seen other people on it and stuff like that. So it looked like fun, but we never ever had one. In fact, if you look at pictures of them, they're much smaller than you think. So,
well, I think they must be, because it's always little kids that are on them. And in all truth, I think I did manage to get on one once, but by that time they weren't the classic model. They'd interfered with them and given them go faster stripes and all the rest of it. Now, I did think about, when we were putting the show together, should we lean in to every 70s cliche going?
Maybe.
Why not? It never usually stops us in any other given week, so let's go and find out. If you never really had a go on a space hopper, I wonder if JT did, and more to the point, has he got one up there in the Doctor Who loft? Talk to me. Let's find out. Shaped like a Sontaran or something. Hello, mate.
Hello there. Who's for a swim?
Who's for a swim?
No.
It's a quote from this fabulous story we're going to be reviewing today.
Of course.
Yes, yeah. So I am delighted. Hi, Spacebookers. I'm really excited about today. The Three Doctors is a real personal treasure for me, because it was by Bob, and secondly, because of course it was part of the now legendary Five Faces of Doctor Who back in 1981, which was my first introduction to the story. So delighted that we've got around to doing this, and really excited about what the Spacebookers are going to put through and tell us about their memories of this story.
Yeah.
Memories, more quotes. See if you can confound us. I think it will take a lot to confound JT. Probably knows this one line by line. But I think one of my favourites is nobble him.
Yes, nobble him. The dancing. Yeah, definitely.
Absolute cracker. Lots more of those to come, no doubt. Let us know your favourite quotes from this story over in the comments section, and we'll read them out and do our worst, best impressions just for you. Let's bring on the rest of them. We've also got Charlotte Shields back on the show too.
Hello, everybody. I was going to say, I think I'm a bit like Joe, aren't I, today? I've got a nice big jumper on.
It is. Yeah. Now, I did hear that, because obviously Katie Manning plays Jo Grant in this, doesn't she? But she wears, I don't know if you know, she wears bright blue tights. But there was a reason that she wore bright blue tights. Can you guess what that was?
Oh, I have no idea, because the rest of it was blue.
Well, I thought it might have been something to do with CSO. But apparently it was because some of the location filming, the locations that they were on, it was so cold there that her legs were turning blue anyway. So she thought, well, how can I cover it up? I'll just wear blue tights.
It was the only time that she could actually do that, because they were on location and you know, it was freezing because they were filming in a cold time. So good for Katie for saying no chance on this one, mate. I'll tell you.
It does look very cold. It
was freezing for them apparently. Katie will quite happily tell you about everything that happens on location in the Three Doctors. Hi, Katie. Love you.
She's lucky she was on Doctor Who, because a lot of shows they would have just slapped her thighs, wouldn't they? And she'd
Doctor Who did an awful lot of that. Yeah, but we can't afford tights.
Terrible, isn't it? Terrible. So yes, in light of the fact we're here talking about one of the 70s most important slices of Doctor Who, we need as many voices as we can possibly get hold of, and we have him too. Now, I don't know if he remembers. I can't remember what Spangles tasted like, but I think Simon Horton, because he's got a great memory, he probably can.
Well, absolutely. Of course I can remember what Spangles taste of. You got Coca-Cola Spangles. Those are the best ones. Definitely Coca-Cola best ones. And then there were fruity ones as well. But Dan, listen, I've sent you a photo of me on my space hopper to Facebook. So you have to go and find in the Facebook Messenger, go and find the photo of me on my space hopper from probably pretty much this year, or not a million miles away. Anyway, so yeah, I've come in the flowers were in power in 1973. So I've come in my flowery shirt. And I've got my Auton Invasion mug at hand.
Oh, cheers.
So, hello, honky tonks. There we go. It's 1973.
That's Dick Emery that used to say that, was
Dick Emery, absolutely. And I'm sure he must have been huge in 1973. Oh, you are awful.
But I like
you.
But I like
yeah, I used to love Dick Emery. I only caught the tail end of that. I reckon that if there's one person from overseas, though, who probably has seen more Dick Emery than I have. God, that sounded rude. God.
We're 10 minutes in, Dan. We're 10 minutes in.
It's got to be a record for me, isn't it? Yeah, somebody who, he's a bit of an Anglophile, even though he's in Tasmania. He's got just more comedy DVDs, I think, than I have. But he's here with us to celebrate Doctor Who, as always. It's the mighty Matt Pott back on the show.
Contact.
Oh, sorry, hold on. All right, Matt, go on, Matt.
Oh yeah, we should have had that sound effect. Yes. I've got a lot of British UK comedy. That's pretty much all I've got from way back from the 1930s. So I've even got Arthur Askey on my microphone here. No, that's how far back it goes. So I love English comedy. I just love it. And Dick
British
Emery.
comedy.
Oh yeah, two Ronnies. They were massive here. They were probably more massive.
They often describe.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, Matt, they often describe it in Britain, in the home country, as the golden age of television, of which Doctor Who was a major component of. And obviously, television from Britain in the 70s filled up the schedules in Australia, didn't it?
Thankfully, we never ever, because they were so popular over here that we had our own versions. Yeah. So we would actually, once they'd finish over on the main place over in UK, they'd actually come over here and had Father something.
Father.
Yeah, we used to have Father Dear Father down under. They just put the tag down under, and so they just bring the actors over, and then because we had Are You Being Served down under as well. That's quite infamous, and because we had John Inman over, and that was the only thing about the show. They were just repeats of the actual scripts. So it's we had a lot of things. We used to have Steptoe and Son, all that sort of stuff, and we loved it. Mind your language.
Wow, you couldn't play that anymore.
He even stole John Pertwee from us with what you call it?
No, can I just correct you? That's New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
Why they called it Down Under? I don't know. They always steal our Down Under. So.
All right, okay.
They're definitely not down under. Right. They're in the middle somewhere.
John Pertwee.
John Pertwee's classic, mate. Sorry. I love this.
Yeah, this was the very midst of the John Pertwee era, wasn't it? And it wasn't even the anniversary year when this started. But it was heavily advertised and was a feature of the sort of the New Year season. And we're going to try and capture some of that enthusiasm and the flavour of 1973 here on the show with everybody out there watching live on YouTube and Facebook right now. And we've got this lovely little house ad here from the Radio Times when it was just in black and white in the interiors there, and a murky image promising so much. I think that when we're now in the 21st century and we're used to not just this brand, this franchise, this IP having this legacy, but everything's got a legacy now. Back then in 1972, 73, it was incredible that Doctor Who was still on air after 10 years, wasn't it, JT? When you look back, because a lot of shows had been cancelled during the move from black and white to colour. So to even reach a 10th anniversary was a major thing, wasn't it?
It was a miracle that Doctor Who was back on to celebrate its 10th anniversary, because, of course, they had tried to get rid of it after Series 6 when Patrick was leaving. But what had happened, of course, is that John had come in with the wonderful Barry and with the wonderful Terry, and they just made it something, and it just became something iconic at the time. It was essential viewing at that time for young people, and of course it was a family show, and it just took hold and it just captured the public's imagination again. And you have to remember as well, not everybody was seeing it in colour. There was a lot of people didn't get that.
Very few were seeing it in colour at the time.
I mean, I remember black and white televisions being around me. We were quite posh because we did have a colour television when I was around about, I think it came in when I was about 4 or 5. So we were quite lucky. You would rent it from Rumbelows, and that came through. So a lot of people saw the Pertwee era in black and white because a lot of people didn't get the colour TVs until the late 70s, really.
I don't think my family had I don't think my parents had one until around 75. So, they would have seen this in black and white. And it seems unimaginable. It seems unimaginable when you look at how colourful the show and the cast are, doesn't it, Charlotte? Not just Katie Manning's legs, it's also colourful, so vivid.
Well, obviously, you've got all the suits and all the clothes John would wear. You've got obviously the settings that you could tell they knew that they're meant to be in colour. It really has that feel. I think even if I watched one of these in colour, it would still have that feel that'd be very different to a Troughton to me, or a Hartnell. There's just something about the way they filmed, especially this story. It's so gorgeous, and you can tell they were fully using that with Omega and the palace and everything going on.
Yeah, you're right, Charlotte. I mean, the big thing about the BBC back then at that point is that they were aware that they were filming in colour. So therefore, everything had to be really over the top. Everything was, especially in Doctor Who, they suddenly went, oh my God, we can do this, 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 and this. And Doctor Who, and it's seen in the Three Doctors clearly, was always the experimentation, Charlotte, for CSO, colour separation overlay, which is now, oh God, it's now virtual stuff now. It all started there with this gorgeous British legendary show, which was then celebrating its 10th, and it's just grown and grown and grown and grown. And that was the magic of it, Charlotte. You can actually see it in the episodes. They're going, let's experiment.
Bang. Oh, no, yeah. You couldn't see that.
And
been watching...
Go on, Matt.
I was going to say, I've been watching a lot, like Dan said, I've been watching a lot of British comedy lately, and I was watching The Goodies, which was made at the same time as when they were making the John Pertwee Pertwee era. And it was you could see that they were using a lot of the stuff that Doctor Who had. I suppose it was the same department, but you know, it was just the fact that it's the same effects and everything, and you could see that they were also experimenting. You know,
not the same people, Matt, because in those days, of course, the donut, as we used to call TV Centre, everybody was in that, and that was the magic of it, because all the departments worked on all the shows, and it all came out from this massive theatre of television. And it was all up, and everybody worked on things and shared props, and that was the beauty of it back in the day.
I saw a thing recently with Graham Garden walking into BBC Radio, and it was all just dusty and cobwebs and everything like that, because it had obviously
I actually forgot
gone into disrepair.
I actually forgot while we were watching this that the Brigadier had never been into the TARDIS.
That's right. It was his first time.
Yeah,
it's a magic moment.
About that. Yeah, I forgot all of
and
that.
Nick plays it in a beautiful way. Nick's just perfect with that. He just goes in and takes it all in a British Brigadier style. Yeah, right. This is what
Benton
you've been doing
as
with
well.
all the resources.
It was Benton as well.
I was going to say that's what it works, because obviously with Denton, you can see he's very taken back.
Yeah.
Whereas you compare that to the Brig, like you said, and it's just like, oh, of course it looked like this.
Yeah, nothing shocks him by this point with the Doctor, Charlotte. He's known the Doctor for so long now. The Doctor cannot shock him at all.
No, even having two of them doesn't shock him really in the story.
Well, when the third one comes along, he shrugged his shoulder, and three of them didn't know when I was better off. Beautiful writing, absolutely beautiful writing.
There's so much in the gift of the Three Doctors, as you say. That's before you even get to the novelty of bringing together three incarnations, the only incarnations of the Doctor at this point. 18 months ago, Marvel Studios and Sony, they bought three Spider-Men swinging across the screen, didn't they? And everybody whooped at that. And it was also obviously it was very elaborate and acrobatic and very, very expensive. Here, over 50 years ago now, Simon, this cheap and cheerful Saturday tea time treat that was just delivered in those 25-minute chunks delivered something arguably as thrilling for the people who are devoted to it, didn't they?
Well, I think it's not only arguably as thrilling. I think we've got to remember this was quite groundbreaking. In fact, this was very, very groundbreaking. The show, it had been going for 10 years, but actually, in all honesty, it had been going only 10 years. And so it was quite a bold, out there move to say, well, let's just put all three of the lead actors back together again. It was quite a bold move. I think we sort of forget that now, that actually when you think about it, it was very much out of the box to put your three lead actors together. The general public were not used to that kind of thing happening in their shows. And so I think we've got to praise Terence Dicks and Barry Letts for it wasn't their idea. It came from the viewers. It came from the fans, constantly badgering them with letters, saying we want to see the Three Doctors together. But it was quite a bold thing for them to do on mainstream BBC One at that time. Quite out there.
So that is true then, that people would send in letters asking for
Yeah.
this. Why haven't you done?
Yeah. And they fought it for a very long time. Barry and Terence fought it because they just thought it was too cheap a gimmick. And then, of course, it was only once they actually got to the 10th anniversary and they're looking at a way to celebrate the 10th anniversary that they kind of thought, oh, actually, yeah, that idea that we've been badgered with, actually, it's not such a bad idea now. So let's give it a go.
It wasn't just that, of course. It was the fact that every season opener for Barry and Terry, they wanted to have a big, grand thing like the Daleks. You know, we're in the Masters introduction with the they wanted to make a real impact.
Yeah,
and as Simon says, it just fitted perfectly that this time round they could go ahead and they could do something that would actually kick off the 10th series by bringing them together. It was just perfect timing, and of course, it was a massive hit. Huge hit. So
I'm just surprised that John Pertwee wanted to have someone else in his camera.
He didn't. He had no choice.
Sure, we'll get into all of that. It's a very storied story, and whilst it's quite, I think it's quite uncomplicated compared to the Five Doctors, let alone what went into the Day of the Doctor and all the cut and thrust behind the scenes there, Ian, of who was nearly in it and what nearly happened. There's still quite a lot to talk about with the Three Doctors, considering it was such an innocent time.
Do you know, I felt after watching it again, thanks to Dan, because my Blu-ray's not working, but after watching it again, I felt really sad that Hartnell wasn't a lot in it. And watching it again, my heart just sunk. You know that bit where it says we have to get the first Doctor out there, do you know? And my heart just lifted. But then I knew he didn't get out there, so my heart just sank as well. But I loved seeing him again. He's like,
but you know what, Ian? Actually, the other way of looking at that is, thank God he was still alive and he was in it. Yeah. It was so close. He only died a couple of years after this, bless him. So thank goodness he did manage to get in there, because I mean, his wife Heather Hartnell was sort of against it because she knew how ill he was. And so that's the way I look at it. I'm just relieved that he is in it in some capacity.
The other thing about it is, like this whole story itself, it set a precedent because 10 years later another one would get trapped, and then they can get trapped every other.
And then in the 30th, they all got trapped.
Something very good there.
They all got trapped in '93. Yes, you're right. It did set a precedent and an expectation that I think showrunners, producers, and maybe even cast members have been cursing ever since. Here we are in 2023, the 60th anniversary year, counting down the months till November, till it all potentially could happen again. Who knows who will get on screen then? What's going to happen? You know, we'll keep speculating on it, and we hope that you keep listening and keep joining in there on YouTube and Facebook. We'll get to some of your comments in a moment. Thank you so much for being here. But I thought it might be fun to take a look at, even though we're talking about an era of entertainment, there was nothing like what we've got now with hundreds of TV channels and portable devices in everybody's pockets. There were things that were competing for people's attention out there. So here's some of the sights and the sounds of 1973. These are the movies that were at the cinema back then.
I've seen them all.
I was going to say, did you? I know you. Did you sneak in to go and see maybe the Wicker Man? Did you sneak into the curtain at the back of the room?
I'll tell you one thing. My dad got me. I must have been 14. My dad got me in to see The Exorcist. My dad took me to see The Exorcist. Yeah, he took me to see The Exorcist. He knew the guy at the cinema and the guy, and also the guy at the door. And me and my brother, we just went in there. We're like 14. I think I was 13. My brother was 15. We were sitting in a cinema full of adults watching The Exorcist. I was terrified. Sorry, brings back memories. So there you go.
So that's just one. I mean, one of my favourite movies of all time.
Yeah, agreed.
Several classics here, Simon. The Sting there with Paul Newman and Robert Redford. Got The Day of the Jackal, Mean Streets, the Scorsese film. That wasn't it?
Yeah.
Enter the Dragon. How you can't get more 73 than Enter the Dragon. Can you, JT?
You remember with Enter the Dragon that poster of Bruce Lee was just everywhere. But my personal favorite out of all of that, well, The Exorcist is massive. It's in my top 10, as is The Wicker Man. And the Wicker Man, if you've never seen The Wicker Man, and don't worry, we're not going to spoil anything tonight for you. If you've never seen The Wicker Man, just go and watch it. Just period. Go and watch The Wicker Man.
And
Brilliant.
take
What
your
about
marshmallows.
Carry On Girls? What about Carry On Girls?
Well,
I know.
That is
You
good
had
too.
to hold me back from that one. I was like, Margaret Nolan in that is fantastic. I was like, I love that film. I do.
It's as formative in my youth, certainly, as anything like The Exorcist was there. And Richard Roundtree, he was still going into battle as Shaft. George Lucas was just beginning, even before Star Wars. That was his first full-length feature, wasn't it? American Graffiti there. So that's just some of the sights on the big screen. As for what was in your ears, these were some of the big albums at the time. You got Macca and Wings there with Band on the Run, and Dark Side of the Moon by Keith Floyd. He was a chef by Pink Floyd. Quadrophenia, the classic Who album Quadrophenia that would become a movie, that was out, and so was the Elton John album, the double album Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. That
was a Freudian slip there, actually, Dan, 'cause Keith Floyd was a very good pal of Bob Baker.
Really?
I love that cover of that Band on the Run. He's got everyone on that cover is English, and we, like you would. If you lived in that time, you know who those people are on the cover. So it's very, very English.
Tom Conti was there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Various people. Christopher Lee. Yeah. Clement Freud.
That's right.
Classic.
Freud. Yeah.
Classic album cover. The Bruce Springsteen. He was still going. Yeah, extraordinary time. And in Britain, I think. I mean, some of this stuff, Charlotte. Does this seem like the dim?
Too
distance?
young.
My dad's a massive Springsteen fan, and I grew up listening to Springsteen, so I've got a good track record of him. And I know of the Who, but I've never proper listened to their music. But it's just, I think what I love though, just looking at the posters and the cover art of everything you showed, you could just see there was so much care and so much experiment, like we were saying, that spirit of experimenting.
So the age of originality.
Yeah, you could really.
That's what drugs do, Charlotte.
Not all drugs, Matt. Not all drugs.
As well as that, the top. Can anybody guess what the top toy of 1973 was?
Ooh, Evel Knievel?
Kaplunk, something like Kaplunk. Oh, No, not Stretch Armstrong. That's too early, isn't it?
Was it Evel Knievel? Because I know Evel Knievel. All my friends have Evel Knievel.
Or Action Man, maybe. Action Man.
Maximum points to Ian David Deere.
Oh, wow.
The Evel Knievel stunt cycle was the must-have toy.
I had one of them.
Marvelous stuff. But of course, if you were Simon Horton, he absolutely did have one of these in the end. So Simon did have a space offer there. So we've got that. Thank you for sending that, Simon.
I have no shame.
I had one of those.
This was taken last year.
Those ears look very suspicious.
Yeah, and if you look very, very closely, you'll see I am wearing an ABBA badge. That is an ABBA badge on my beautiful caramel jumper there. That's me wearing my proud ABBA badge.
ABBA forever. So, yeah. Thanks for that. Let's go and check out what people are saying, because we've rambled on enough as it is, haven't we? Let's go and see which memories we've managed to kick some dust off over there in the live chat there on YouTube and Facebook. Oh, yeah. Ahoy, shipmates, says Crimpling Doubloon. Who'd have thought? I haven't heard that for a while. Good to see you, CD. Kelly's here too with a hail chat. Peter Harrington's in the house too. Good to see you, Peter. In fact, Peter's just had a big birthday, haven't you, Peter? Happy birthday for the other day, mate. Good to have you back with us. I hope you well, you obviously got out of there in one piece that night in the cells. I've heard all about it. Raymond Williams says, good evening all and goodbye. I've got to pick up my youngest from the school silent disco. I'll see you all later. Cheers, Raymond. Well, if you're watching this in the future, I hope you liked it before you left. And please don't like it again now. Whatever's, get your priorities right, my friend. Retro Doc's here too. Greetings, chat, panel, and Gel Guard lovers everywhere. That Gel Guard, he reminds me of the dude out of the Orville, Matt. Do you remember what's his name? Yaffet, is it?
Yeah.
What?
Yaffet. Yes, Yaffet.
Could be a bit,
Simon, I'm also confused.
Way over my head, that one.
I'll show you a picture of that later on.
It's fine.
Color, gelatinous. There's a gelatinous theme. Thursdays. Happy Type 40 Day, says Shah. Couldn't agree more, Shah. Couldn't agree more. Greetings from deep within the Badlands of Gwent, in the realm of the Dead Dragon, from the one, the only, the Darren Zone. Hi, Darren. It was Darren's wedding anniversary too the other day, isn't it? God, it's getting like CBBC, isn't it? We did the birthdays, the anniversaries.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Darren, mate.
Send in your cards with your name on and your address.
Yeah, we'll give you Wallaby hops for them.
Look into the mirror.
Evening all, says Paul Murray. All incarnations get that welcome. Make sure you've liked the video, says Shah. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Shah. What else? Let's scroll around here, see what's going on. Richard Brooks says, good evening, folks. I hope you are all hale and hearty for another great live show. Is that how you spell? That's hale and pace. I'll take your word for it. Make the Extremist is here too. Here we go. Bring on the three doctors. Well, we've got 2.5.
Yeah.
2.5 doctors. I adore the three doctors, said Richard Brooks. Looking forward to this discussion.
So am I. Let's get
Who
it going.
doesn't adore the three doctors?
Yeah, I can't think of any fans I know that don't. I think I'd say it's kind of illegal to be cynical about this story. We have Mark Milford here too. So Type 40 Live, my weekly Doctor Who convention, the best guests and the smartest panel anywhere. Praise.
Thank
redacted.
you, Mark.
Oh, thank you. Good to have you back. Gary Browser's here as well. Nice to see you, Gary. And so I've seen lots of other names here. Who else? Omega Time Waits. Omega Time Waits. That's the name. TARDIS Spider. Don't jump on me, chat. Bring him back. Bring back TARDIS. There he is. Hello from the Gulf Coast, Gulf of Mexico. Good to see you, mate.
Cool.
The Primord Infectant, direct from the Pertwee era, has joined us. Still hasn't got any talcum powder for that. Never mind. Hope the cold's treating you well. Hi all from Rebecca Gold. No, is Ada McGee's here too with her greetings, fellow Earthlings. Well, so far as we know, no confirmations or denials here from the panel at Type 40 Live. Just an insistence that you please like the video now. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the cloister bell to get all the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it. That includes, more live streams, more Type 40 live streams, which are come at you too now over on the podcast feed. So you can go over to type40.podbean.com and get the audio editions of all of these shows sliced and diced and reoffered in a more stream-friendly fashion there to plug in your ears for the school run. If you're like Raymond and got to pick the kids up from something, then you can get us in your ears there too, if you're doing the washing up or whatever. So you get the Type 40 live streams there again, as well as brand new episodes of Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, including our latest. That was a review too. So we got together and we reviewed a story from much later in Doctor Who history, but with another sort of hale and hearty and colourful cast. So get over there to type40.podbean.com or across all the podcatchers and you'll find us there rambling on about whatever we like. Why do we do it all? Why do we do it, Bazza? We do it all for the love of Doctor Who. Of course we do. That's what these event shows are all about, particularly in this anniversary year, to go deep. To go deep on the things that bring us so much joy, that band us together. And I think these anniversaries are a prime example of that. They get us talking, they get us reminiscing, and they get us creating. You guys too, you know how much we love pretty pictures. There'll be lots of those coming up later, but we have an exclusive one here. This was sent, actually you got hold of this for me, JT, didn't you? So this has never been seen before. And I think it's the perfect appetizer for the story, really, isn't it? So what's this?
This is a picture by Paul Tams, which he showed to Bob. Now, if you're not aware, Paul Tams worked with Bob Baker for over 20 years in the development of various canine projects and other stuff like this. And Paul drew this and showed Bob one day quite a while ago. But this actual picture was inspired Bob and Paul to start developing a graphic novel which was based on the original Three Doctors script by Bob and Dave Martin. Now, in that original script, if you're not aware, William Hartnell played a bigger role because at that point nobody knew he was that ill, and also Patrick Troughton was joined by Fraser Hines as Jamie. So that original script was the one they were going to produce a graphic novel on, and it was this picture that actually inspired that thought. And it's quite interesting actually, because Bob was never very happy that he didn't get to write the target novels of his stories. And of course, if he was around today now and the BBC went to him and Penguin Books went to him and said, would you like to do it? He would jump at it and he would actually produce his own versions of all his stories. But, this was a case of him being able to say, well, this would have been the original script and they would have produced it. And that would have been possibly in there somehow. But it's something now that's very much not probably going to happen.
It's surprising, isn't it, that they never went to Bob and Dave and asked them to do that, because I know that Terrance Dicks had a very particular style and it worked for those novels, but Bob and Dave's ideas and the way that Bob, I've read some of Bob's stories, it would have translated perfectly. I wonder why maybe Terrance just got it locked down.
That's what it was. It's simple as that. I think Terrance had it locked down. I think he was the go-to man at that point, and they just didn't go to the original screenwriters at that point. Terrance just cleaned up, as simple as that.
He really did, and there was an awful lot when it came to this particular one as well, because Terrance had to rewrite the entire script when it became known that William Hartnell wasn't that well, and also when Fraser Hines wasn't allowed to be released from his contract from Emmerdale Farm. So Terrance had to rewrite an awful lot of it. Bob and Dave weren't really that involved with the complete rewrite, because they'd done a few drafts and submitted it already. So what happened there then is Terrance had to rewrite all that with all the ongoing stuff, much like Eric Saywood would have to do 10 years later. So it was an interesting time, but I just think it's that original story they had with Hartnell being very active, and then Fraser being in it as Jamie, that would have been quite interesting.
Also, I know that the very original script was originally called The Black Hole. Now, I don't actually know whether they wrote a version of this script and pitched it to the production team, and it was purely for the one Doctor, for the third Doctor, or whether it was always The Black Hole, the original script called The Black Hole, whether that was a 3-Doctor script. Do you happen to know, JT? I don't know that.
I do, yeah. I do. What happened is that they didn't pitch anything at all. What happened is that Terrance was aware of what he called the Baker Boys, the Bristol Boys, which were Bob and Dave. And they went to them with this premise of, we're going to put the 3 Doctors together, write a story in a nutshell. So that's when Bob and Dave wrote their script and wrote this thing, and then submitted it back to the production office, and they said yes, and that's when certain nightmares came along. So really, it was that simple. Terrance said to them, "We want a script." They wrote the script. And then the nightmares happened afterwards. It was as simple as that, really. But
when Patrick Troughton said yes to this, the initial idea was to have Jamie, and they were talking about getting Wendy Padbury and Zoe as well. But Pertwee immediately said no to that.
She was never in the original script. She was never in the original script, Zoe. She never thought it was always going to be Patrick Troughton and Fraser.
No, but they did. But the production team, Dan's right. They did want Zoe in, and that was John Pertwee. Dan's quite right. They put a kibosh on that one and said, "No, there's too many people in the TARDIS now."
I believe in the Black Hole script as well, Jamie had a sort of a flirtation kind of romance with Jo Grant. So obviously, I've never read it, so I don't know.
When you look at Jamie, he flirted with everybody, everything. He flirted with Victoria, he flirted with Zoe. There was even a sort of little thing originally with Polly, so that was very much in Jamie's character. He even did it with Perry, if you remember, when the 2 Doctors comes along.
I always felt there was that there too. I mean, I suppose Fraser's very good looking, very charismatic actor, whatever age that he is, isn't he? I think he still does quite well now, and the guy's in his 70s. So I suppose it's not that surprising. I know there was an original story called Death World as well that was pitched. I don't know if that was Bob and Dave, but that was the original idea for the 10th anniversary. I think it was still Bob and Dave, but that was quite a complex and quite political story, where it was connected with an intergalactic federation and a sort of underworld, and the Doctor was meant to do battle with various incarnations of death, sort of the 4 horsemen of apocalypse and the Hindu goddess Kali and things from Greek mythology and all manner of things. But you can see why they sort of jettisoned that idea for the much warmer. And as you said, Simon, if people have been writing in and asking for the 3 Doctors on screen, it makes you wonder why.
But as I say, I still the main thing I take away from all this is I'm thinking back now as though this was 1973. It's just how groundbreaking it was. We take it for granted now that we get these multi-Doctor stories. We used to it. We expect them. We didn't then, and it was groundbreaking to a large extent. This was fan fiction, what we would now call fan fiction. in many ways. It really it was quite out there for mainstream BBC One to be doing this.
Well, it would have been if they'd had their original way, it would have been more out there, because the original idea was to have it more fantasy gothic than what ended up on screen. For certain things, like, you know, Omega was originally, and I've never been able to call this, say this, but Omega was originally called OHM.
It's Om. It's pronounced Om. Yeah,
like the devil. Bob told me he wanted it to be more like the devil, and that was toned down. It had to be toned down. 5 o'clock in the evening, you know,
and of course, the reason they came up with the idea of the villain being Om was because it's Who upside down. That's where the idea came from. That's why it was Om. But Terence and Barry, I think, sort of vetoed that because they just thought it was a little bit too weird. But then of course Om is the Greek word for our anglicisation of Omega. So it's there's a through line there. It all makes sense.
Very close. The story's very close to the Five Doctors, isn't it? There's a lot of similarities in this story.
I think so.
As well as
this story sort of sets that scene for whatever comes around. And what Simon was saying there is that fans have become very entitled. Every 10 years, you have to have a multi-doctor thing, you know, and I think that is entitlement, really. I don't think it's necessary. But, you know, there is this element coming. But what Bob and Dave did is they took a look at, you know, Doctor Who as a whole, which was 9 years old when they began to write this. And what they did, and the magic of what they did, is that they pushed it on without actually harming what had gone before. They added to it in a beautiful way. And those repercussions of what they added to are felt to this day, you know, with Omega and the whole thing of Time Lord Society and the Hand of Omega, which came years later. So, yeah.
It's honestly, it's... sorry, go ahead, Charlotte.
No, I think what's interesting is, and I think I certainly felt this watching this for the first time, it was like this idea of the Time Lords were actually so present for once. They weren't this sort of shadowy figure. They weren't this sort of talked about in hushed tones. No, you actually saw them, and you saw them be sort of put under pressure, and you saw what they could do. They could literally get incarnations of the Doctor and just put them in it where they wanted them and go, right, you do this job. And even Omega, it's like, it's interesting what you were saying about the devil, because I had that feeling watching it of Omega was this sort of godlike figure. He was this sort of mythological godlike thing that was this otherworldly. So I got that watching it.
Well, also, Charlotte, following on from that, Omega is very much a fallen angel. He literally is a fallen angel. He's a fallen Time Lord. He literally fell into the abyss, the same as Lucifer did.
And if
as
you
I
think
understand
about what he feels abandoned. He feels like he's been left by his brother.
As I understand it, he's not a Time Lord. He actually was before the Time Lords.
Yes, that's right.
Because he seems to have
couldn't regenerate.
And he can't regenerate. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, he's a Gallifreyan from the original build foundations of Gallifrey that we don't actually go into. It's before the time he created the time travel capabilities and the regeneration capabilities that the Time Lords place the society on. That's the whole thing about of Omega. With Razalon, it comes out later. Razalon's around that point as well, isn't it?
We've got a question here, JT. We've got a question here, JT, and Paul Murray's just asking: is that original script online anywhere that people can read? I'm not.
It isn't. It's not available online. I'm afraid
it does exist. It's out there.
It does exist, but should I tell you this? Yeah, I'll tell you this, and if I get told off, I get told off. Bob sold it before he died.
Oh no, really? Because I remember seeing it, JT. I remember seeing it at a convention. I think maybe Bob had it at a convention. I can't remember. That's how I knew it was called the Black Hole, because I remember seeing it.
It was called the Black Hole, and Paul had seen it obviously a lot of time because they're working from that original script. Well, we're getting feedback from somewhere. For the graphic novel and what was to come after it, but at some point Bob decided, well, I've got this now, and he sold it to a private collector. So if that private collector's out there, you've got yourself a real collector's item. Congratulations.
Thank you to everybody who's joining us a little later in the live chat. People are still coming in now, such as Daniel Leach is here too. Scottish Davros and friends wrestle with pop culture.
Hi, Daniel.
He's in, and so is Problem being hello to the rest of
Hello, Problem Being.
Good to see you, mate.
It's brilliant, Charlotte, that you got that thing about Omega coming through. I'm so impressed with that because I was wondering. I was going to ask you actually if you'd seen it because I know you're catching up with 26 fantastic years.
I watched it for the first time this week.
Oh, so it's fresh in your mind. But I'm so impressed. I just wish sometimes, that Bob was still around because I would tell him, well, Charlotte got the devil in. He would just love that. He would really love that because he felt that it got lost in part of the performance, certainly in the look of it.
I got it from the performance. I got it from the sort of, like I said, this idea of him being this hero, but he feels like he's been forgotten and he's been abandoned.
I never looked at it quite like that either. But there's something very classical about it. I think the way that Stephen Thorne plays it's very classical. But what you were saying, Simon, about the fallen angel, I never looked at it that way either. And I think that could be down to me, maybe the age that I first saw it, because I think there's a touch of the Wizard of Oz about this as well.
Oh, there is. 100%.
And I also think that this is slightly more controversial. We're looking at 1973 now. And although I didn't mention it earlier on, we were talking about movies and music. In 73, I'm very aware that the original series of Star Trek was playing on BBC One. It came to BBC One, didn't it, in 1970, and had played for 3 or 4 years. It was becoming a mainstay of the schedules.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm not saying that Bob and Dave. I think Bob and Dave probably did watch Star Trek.
No,
and
not
to
really.
my mind, do you think they probably did, JT? No.
I mean, they were industry professionals. They would have been aware of it, but they were too busy. They were both producing, they were directing, they were writing. They had various things going on. It wasn't just Doctor Who, of course. They had other little things there.
Well, no, this is the thing. But following their work, JT, when I see their work, I see a set of stories that's very much connected and aware. They're not stories that are happening in bubbles. They're very aware that time is changing around them and that culture was changing around them. And I think when I looked at Omega in this story, watching it this time, it reminded me of the original series of Star Trek. Because quite regularly in that show they would meet, wouldn't they, Ian? You know that show as well, really well. They would meet a lot of these omnipotent beings, wouldn't they? Who were played in a very sort of straight down the line classical way. And the problem that they were in, the moral dilemma, the ethical dilemma they were facing was always presented in quite a similar way. And I think that that's something that Bob and Dave's script sells really, really well.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of how they write, though. I mean, there's always something like that. I mean, if you look at some of their Z-Cars stuff, or even the Sontaran experiment, which comes a couple of years later. I mean, there's these characters here. I mean, they were just good at what they do, and they weren't necessarily. I mean, these guys wouldn't have watched television, really. I mean, it was still in its infancy. They were too busy working. They certainly wouldn't have seen anything like that. So they weren't influenced by all those sort of stuff. They were just good at understanding. So in their plot, they've created this massive figure that has given life to not just the Doctor, but his people. So, of course, they're going to write him as some sort of godlike creature, because the Doctor would naturally look at Omega and go, oh, Lord, you're the one that gave us all this. And
I mean, my absolute favourite line in The Three Doctors is that line from Omega, I should have been a god. I mean, literally, the whole story pivots on that one line, and he delivers it so well.
He didn't say it. Simon, he didn't say it, he shouted it, mate.
You're right. And it literally, you feel the power from him, don't you, Ian? Do you think that? I just feel the power within those words, the anger. Really,
it's as if the set is shaking, everything is tremoring, even on modern television. And the idea that this is the thing that sort of is parallel to that for me is that this is the Doctor's. Yeah, he could have been a god. But what really gets to me is the idea that my hero, Doctor Who, the Doctor, he was his hero.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what Pertwee's Doctor says. And I love that reaction when he first sees him. You can just see this utter disbelief. And then when the second Doctor comes and he's like, oh, is that him? Yeah. It's like, oh, it's so weird to see the Doctor. Can I
talk about how English The Three Doctors is? It made me laugh so much watching this. I originally saw it in black and white, right? And I mean, I've seen it 6 times in color and stuff. But this is my 7th time watching it. But it always makes me laugh how these fantastical things happen yet none of them are blown away by the fantastical. Like that scientist, for instance, at the end, and he goes, "Nobody's going to believe me anyway." He's very British, and he walks out. Do you know what I mean? In real life, people go, I'm going to tell the world. You know, you're going to write a book about it. Do you know what I mean? It's very.
And then you become David Icke and thrown into a padded cell.
That too.
It's lines like that, Ian. I think it's lines like that that are just pure Doctor Who and would only ever happen in Doctor Who, and that's one of the things that makes Doctor Who so beautiful. I think is lines exactly like that.
The only thing that didn't for me watching it again didn't gel was the guy in the beginning that got zapped, the farmer that got zapped at the end. Really, if you took him out of the story, it wouldn't make any difference, really. But I love what he says at the ending.
Yeah.
What does he say at the ending? He says,
he says, "You'll never believe me, woman. What's for tea?" or something like that.
I love the bit with the wife, because for me she's very British. The Joe and Doctor are like, "God, where's your husband? He's missing," and she's like, "Oh, he does this a lot. It'd be fine."
My nan and granddad were just like them. I remember that generation.
Absolutely. Welcome to
it
Britain.
made me laugh.
But again, interestingly, that opening scene, I mean, you say that Mr. Ollis is kind of redundant in the story. He is. But having said that, that opening scene, whenever I watch that opening scene, again, it's just kind of classic Doctor Who. It sums up in about a couple of minutes what we love about Doctor Who. It's just this mysterious opening. Which other show is going to open with a weather balloon stuck in a bird sanctuary and somebody gets zapped and disappears? It's just beautifully done. It's so subtle, it's so understated, and it just immediately sets up this sense of mystery that rivets you to the screen, because you want to know where he's gone. You want to know what's going to happen.
Well, that could potentially, if it could happen to him, JT, it could happen to us when we're walking back from school.
That was the idea. I mean, if it was going to happen to an unknown that you don't know at the beginning, the children would have been thinking, "What's happening next? What's happening next?" It's coming from the Doctor.
It's a book.
That's all the kids want. It's on its way to the Doctor. But I mean, the show is it's also littered with great lines. I mean, one of my favourite ones was when Pat is there and he's talking to Benton and he's putting all this across, and he's talking about this lovely effect they've got for 1973 there. And he says, we have to feed it with useless information. I wonder if I have a television set handy. Yeah. And that's more relevant today than ever before. It's just a brilliant thing that the Doctor would say.
Very colourful Time Lord, says Sam in the live chat on YouTube. I'd like to know what their interior decorator was on. Gary Browser said he's got the best mask. Just saying. I think he's talking
agreed, Gary. Agreed.
Classic design. All of this knowledge and it's free, says TARDIS Spider. Multi-Doctor stories tend to have similar elements to each other, says Daniel Leach. And I suppose that's simply because they've got to do to craft some sort of really complex, deep political allegory or densely plotted thing to sort of march the characters through. That's not what people ideally. That's not what they want of a celebration like this, is it? I see a lot of cynicism around anniversary stories, and the same with finales, but particular anniversary stories. And you think, well, you can't be all things to all people. It's a celebration of a moment. It's an encapsulation of a moment, and it's an ideal time to kind of indulge yourselves and to revel in these characters, some of which we would have really, really missed. I mean, I don't think that anybody can seriously be cynical about this. I meet people who claim that they don't like these stories, either this or the Five Doctors, and quite frankly, I never really believed them, Matt.
The one thing I like about this, obviously, to me, is John Pertwee. John Pertwee is absolutely brilliant as the Doctor. If you look at Pat and if you look at William, they're all very different, right? So, but to me, Pertwee's Doctor, he had a command about him. Everything he says was a command. Everything he does, right, he does with a purpose. It's not like Pat running around going, "Oh my giddy," and he's running around, like a clown, whatever. But I like John Pertwee because if you look forward as well, the future Doctors, they all kind of tried to copy each other, didn't they? But John didn't copy anyone. He was just John.
Yeah.
And that's
what I like the most? Even those Doctors have, like Troughton and Pertwee, have the utmost respect for the first Doctor.
Yes,
and right. I love that. I love how they talk to him. They're like, as soon as he comes in, the presence, you know, they're all intent.
Well,
and
the second doctor at one point, the second doctor at one point, JT says, "I've always had the greatest respect for what he says." It's a beautiful line. Another beautiful line.
It's a beautiful line, but it's reality coming into the fiction there, because actually, when you look at it, the first Doctor's the youngest of the lot of them. So the current incumbent is the wisest and the one that they should all be looking up to, because the Hartnell's actually the child now. Actually, you know, he's way thousands of years back down there. You don't matter, mate, because you're 10. And you would look at him as a child if you're the current incumbent. So basically, that's the whole thing about, well, it's because Hartnell originated the role, which he did, and no one can ever take that away from him. He made it popular. He put the template in, and certainly the following 3 honored that. And then, you know, and it goes on from there. But I always thought that was a bit odd, because I look at it from, you know, when you get to that, you know, you just hang on a minute. No, if that was my younger self, I'd just shut up. You know, nothing. We're going to do
it. In many respects, they could so easily have gone down that route, and it would have been logical to go down that route and treat that first Doctor with sort of disdain, that you know nothing. But it's the fact that they don't, and quite rightly, and it just makes it beautiful as a result, because everybody there is basically saluting Hartnell as the governor.
It happens 10 years later, doesn't it, in the 5 Doctors? But in the 3 Doctors, I think it's basically, I've thought about this many times over the years, and I actually had a Sado fan conversation about this when I was talking to Bob about the 3 Doctors. Not that Bob was listening to me at this point at all, because he's gone off into fan nonsense and I'm not listening. I was always saying, is it possible that the older Doctors really respect the first Doctor because he's the one that nicked the TARDIS and left Gallifrey? And Bob's like,
whatever.
Well, I'm just thinking, I think for the dynamics, so you needed them to have that respect, because the first Doctor is very clearly the sort of the core presence which grounds the 2 of them, because if I love the scenes when if you leave those 2 in a room for long enough, they just start arguing, they just start having a pop at each other. So you need that first Doctor to basically put his foot down and say,
the only one that really
the first Doctor, he had the answers, didn't he? And he was the one that solved the problems. And when Troughton was, you know, when he said something to Troughton, he was like, "Of course, we have to go. We have to let it zap us." Do you know what I mean? And it was.
It's a bridge. It's a bridge.
Yeah, it's a bridge.
The only one who's indifferent, as far as I'm concerned, is the Brigadier. The Brigadier's like, "Who's this fella?"
Of course,
you know?
of course,
That's the Brig's character. It's all in the day for the Brig now. He's seen so much by this point, he doesn't really care. You could throw a speed devil at him and he won't care. You know, whatever.
Seen so much, but the stakes were very, very high, and this was pretty spectacular. When you break it down like this, just in case you've never seen the 3 Doctors or haven't seen it in a while, this is the synopsis. A weather balloon lands at a bird sanctuary. The Time Lord homeworld comes under attack from a black hole that sustains it. Unit HQ, and in particular the Doctor, find themselves besieged by a hostile globular entity. All these events are connected, but all are powerless to help themselves. Or are they? Breaking the first law of time, the Time Lords cross over the Doctor's time stream to unite his 3 incarnations and send them into the void for a confrontation with a desperate, lonely figure from their own history whose plan could threaten not just their existence, but that of all things.
All things.
I love it. I love it.
I don't know about Bird Sanctuary, because the guy's there with a shotgun for it. So it's not exactly sanctuary for the birds, is it?
But, you know, it's just amazing. I still can't get over the fact it was the 10th anniversary, and here we are now in 2023, and it's still a massively important story. It's still incredibly popular. You know, youngsters love it when they come across Doctor Who as well, because it's had a massive impact on what happened for the rest of the show's run. And it's just unreal. And because I first saw it, as I mentioned at the top of the show, in the 5 Faces of Doctor Who, it retains that specialness for me, because that was, Charlotte, you'll never understand, because you weren't there, you'll never understand to us what the 5 Faces of Doctor Who did and the impact it had on all of us, a certain generation, and how special it was. But that story was just like, oh my, you know, there they are in colour. There's the 3 of them, and it was, I can't believe it. You know, here we are now, 2023, and it's so long ago.
But it's interesting for me. It was the second time I'd seen, because I do remember it on broadcast. It's one of those stories that I can just about remember enough that I certainly remember watching the whole thing as a kid, and I would only have been what was I, about 4 or 5 at the time? Yeah, 4. I was 4 at the time, and yet I can still remember it really, really clearly. And so to revisit the 5 Doctors then was phenomenal, because I could remember it, and so to go back and you remember, no, it really was as good as you imagined it was.
Also, it's really good that because John Pertwee's Doctor and Patrick Doctor, they kept arguing all the time. Yeah. So it was people around them that were telling them ideas, like the bit where they were stuck in that room and Joe goes, you know, if wasn't it, Omega can think up all this stuff, then you guys can, because you're Time Lord.
You know, think of a door.
Think of a door. You know, and it was because they couldn't see past each other or
and
themselves.
And it is the joy. That is the joy of it, is watching the two of them bicker. Watching the two Doctors, it's beautiful to watch. It never gets boring.
No, it did carry over a little into the production of this story. I've got this quote here from Terence Dix, who says that yes, famously, they had very different working practices, Pertwee and Troughton. Troughton used to like to sort of play fast and loose with the script, whereas Pertwee had to be on book, had to be line by line. But Terence Dix said that to enable them to get on set, because they would conflict even during rehearsals, he said, we persuaded John to be a bit more flexible and Pat to stick a little closer to the script. So that's how they found that happy medium. And of course, they went on to become great friends.
Oh yes,
in their personal lives until Patrick Troughton died in 1987.
But it's funny because you know, when John Pertwee knew that Patrick Troughton was going to be coming on to his show, he wasn't best pleased about it, and there was a lot of friction to begin with through a lot of the production until they sort of warmed to each other. I found this brilliant quote that I'm going to read out to you here from Patrick Troughton. Well, first of all, apparently when Terence Dix was asked how they got on, did they get on at all, and Terence Dix in his inimitable style said, not at all. So I don't think there was much love lost there. Patrick Troughton apparently famously said to John Pertwee, instead of worrying about what I'm going to say, worry about what you're going to say. Because John Pertwee was getting so uppity with Patrick Troughton the whole time, because he never knew what Patrick Troughton was going to say, because Patrick Troughton would just simply not stick to the script. He just paraphrased the script every time. So John Pertwee was always moaning about saying, I want to know what you're going to say, and Patrick was saying, no, forget me. You just focus on what you're going to say.
It's somehow connects and it translates.
This was all done in the rehearsal rooms, by the way, not on the actual set.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sorry.
On set. It's all in rehearsal.
Yeah.
Shah's in the live chat, and she says that it's the staple is the chemistry between Troughton and Pertwee. They're electric on screen. Every time I watch it, I can't help but smile until my cheeks hurt. That's so accurate. I mean, look at us. Here we are again.
We're all smiling.
Exactly like when we talked about the 5 Doctors, and the time ticks on, and I'm losing track of the time already, because it's that kind of story. Peter Harrington says it's a great story to sit near the fire and lose yourself in. That happened to me just the other evening. I decided to sit down and watch this on Blu-ray for the very first time. I was going to, you guys know me. I'm not a binge watcher. I was going to spread it across the week. I watched episode 1. Thought, I quite enjoyed that, but it's only just getting going. I'll go and watch something else. Then I'll watch part 2 later on. So I did that, and I watched part 2, and then I think I went and made myself some cereal or a drink or something. Thought, I may as well watch part 3 now. And before I knew it, I'd watched all four parts in one evening. Yeah. It's that watchable, that enjoyable, just as Peter says there. And I had just a brilliant evening. I spaced out those 4, and I never do this, Matt, but I did it for the 3 Doctors. And I think, well, maybe I've been watching Doctor Who wrong for the last few years, and I should do this more. But maybe we should continually mix up the way we watch stuff. I don't know, but it was a revelation watching it all with that level of intensity, Simon, one after the other after another.
Yeah, and we don't do that much anymore. I mean, just going back to what you were saying there, don't you think the cliffhangers for episode 1 is just the best cliffhanger of all time?
Cliffhangers. I think all of the cliffhangers are brilliant in this.
But episode 1 in particular is genius. It's utterly mad. It's so Bob Baker and Dave Martin, and it's just so out there. What are you going to do? You're going to kidnap Unit HQ. Brilliant.
Big ideas that obviously that Barry Letts and Terence Dicks, they tried to rein in, but it was virtually impossible with Bob Baker and Dave Martin. They were an ideas factory. They thought big, and it's better to think big. I think I said this to Bob Baker when we spoke to him. It's better to think big and then be reined in than to come to something like this with very few ideas and have to sort of to milk it and really sort of desperately mine for something that simply isn't there or that isn't in your capabilities to reach, I suppose. I want to look at the Doctors a little and just to acknowledge that John Pertwee, he was 54 years old at this point, and 3 years in, he was very established in the role. Not just as the Doctor, but as a much loved public figure, and by generations of people too, because I suppose parents felt that they'd always known him because he'd always been on radio for like 10, 20 years and in movies and things, whilst a new generation of children have been completely captivated by his take on this hero. I think he'd turned it into, in some ways, a more trad heroic character. And yet there was definitely the eccentricity and the warmth was underneath it all to make it right for Saturday tea times. This is before my time. I've got no memories of Pertwee, and his Doctor, it took the longest length of time for me to get it with him, but I finally get it now, and I think that's one of the reasons I enjoyed seeing it again so much. Patrick Troughton was 53, so he was just a year younger, and it had been how many years? So 4 years since he'd played the part full time. But he literally appears. He appears, doesn't he?
Just in a flash.
There's no elaborate effects, Charlotte. He literally just blinks onto the screen. And even though this was the first time we'd seen him in colour, it's as if no time's passed at all.
You have that lovely link with the recorder, and just to see Pertwee's Doctor with something that's so associated with another Doctor, and just to see him sort of like put his nose up at it almost and be like, "What's this?" And then it's just perfect. He's holding it out, and Troughton just sort of gets it, and he's like, "Oh, hello, it's mine." And he's just there, and it's perfect.
It's strange, isn't it, Charlotte, how as Ian says, he doesn't remember, and we don't know how many years have passed for the Doctor. But it's weird. It must have been weird for children because it had only been 4 years, and perhaps there was some older kids coming back to this who'd maybe got a little too old for Doctor Who or drifted away from it. And there he was, and he was reminding the audience, as well as reminding his successor. I think it's got all sorts of texture to it, I think.
And I think especially it must have been so odd I'm thinking of older people who would have seen Troughton so much in that black and white era. They would have seen him in such his own era that's very different. And to suddenly see that Doctor put into this setup with Unit, with all these different characters, which you do associate with John's era.
Well, that's what I love. Remembering him, didn't he? Benton. It took a long time to dawn on him that this was the first Doctor he met. It was really weird. I just got a feeling it needed tightening. The editing needed, but then again, they were doing it as a stage play, weren't they? Because they'd sit there with street cameras.
I don't know, Ian. I like the fact that Benton is incredulous by this, and he is. He's totally and utterly shocked because Benton hasn't been on as many journeys as the Brig or Joe at this point. He's still a soldier. He's still in units. We've seen things, but he's not really that involved. Suddenly he's thrown into this box that's bigger on the inside than on the outside. And then he sees a face that, I mean, as a human being, it's physically impossible to have a face that you thought has gone and be replaced by another one. That's a shock to get over for a human being who wants it. But then suddenly you've got the little one with the tall one at the same point in space and time in front of you. And I think John pulls it off usefully because there's one point where Pat's talking and John's just walking behind him like that, going, and then he goes, "It's you," and because he's playing it to point where he's got to get to his mark, but he's pointing, he's playing it all the way through to be able to say, this can't be happening. I'm seeing it. I can't believe this is happening. I think he plays it off. I think he plays it.
But you know what? A lot of people don't
Perfectly.
understand because when they watch Doctor Who today, it's shot like a movie. It's shot like a TV show today. But in those days, it was shot like a play. So they had 3 cameras, and they all had to hit their mark, and they all had to hit do their dialogue and something. The camera was moving to capture the 3 shot, the 2 shot, whatever. So it was a very different way of the way they made Doctor Who in those days and today. Yeah.
I mean, Doctor Who in 1973, from 63 to, I mean, television was still in its infancy in the United Kingdom. And everybody that came into television had come from theatre. And even when you're looking at television in the 80s, it's still the 3-wall open front. You know, you're looking towards the audience type thing, the old style theatre thing. Whereas now, of course, you've got the 360, you've got inbuilt sets, you've got it up here, you're using drone technology. Completely different now because television's morphed into something that's nothing like theatre. Although, of course, theatre is now adapting, so you can have your back to the audience these days and all this sort of stuff. So it's interesting. But that's why I've always said on this show, Doctor Who of old is television history. And if anyone's going to enter the television industry in whatever field, they have to go and look back at classic British television, including Doctor Who, which is showing them how television changes and the technology changes and the performances changes all the way through from its inception. And the 3 Doctors is part of that.
Yeah,
it's the history of television, very much so. I often wonder what William Hartnell made of it all. I mean, I know the man, William Hartnell, was 65 years old and not in good health. He'd been living in retirement pretty much, and I think largely isolated, apart from the company of his devoted wife Heather. He was suffering from undiagnosed arteriosclerosis, and I mean, Heather. It was Heather that found out that he'd sort of agreed to it over the phone. He'd spoken to, it was to Barry Letts, wasn't it? Or was it Barry or Terence? And he'd agreed to do it, but it was on one of his, in inverted commas, good days. He had good days and he had bad days, and so they had to scale back his appearances. And of course, just like you were saying there, Ian, the fact that he can't be involved to the extent that we would have wished is in some ways a great shame and a bit of a tragedy. And yet, I suppose I'm really grateful for the fact that he's there at all. Absolutely. And I think it was so perfectly judged, perfectly written, and Hartnell, for a man who was reading it all off cue cards, apparently, he infused it with so much character. I wouldn't say JT like it was like he last played the part yesterday, but it wasn't far off. I think he got there immediately.
He knew what he was doing. He knew. I mean, I love the fact that, as we know, and Barry and Terence would always talk about this in the conventions that came years after that I would be at, and they would always talk about Bill Hartnell with fondness. But I love the fact that he just said yes like that because he knew that role, and he loved the show and he wanted to be there, and he would have known. He did know it was 10 years nearly, and he just I love that. I mean, he was in love with his character and he wanted to be there, and he said yes without thinking of himself or the fact that he wouldn't have been able to do it. I love that so much. I think it's gorgeous how he did that. But he delivered his lines beautifully, because when you look at it, and you have to know, if you don't know about this as well, they've recorded all this before rehearsal. So in the rehearsal room, William Hartnell's voice was actually there, so Troughton and Pertwee could react to it properly, or whoever else had to talk to it could react to it and get used to it. And they had that all timed. It works. I think it works, and they get away with it.
I think the other thing to remember here, when we talk of William Hartnell, is that let's not forget, effectively, he had been sacked from the role in 66. He was effectively, well, he was certainly.
He was poorly.
Yeah, he was. It wasn't his decision to leave. Let's just say that it was a production decision, and they'd been considering it for quite some time as to whether they should be getting rid of him. And finally, they did gently nudge him out of the door. So he could have sort of taken the quite fair view that no, I'm not going back to Doctor Who. They kicked me out. Why would I want to go back to Doctor Who? And he doesn't. He takes the noble decision, and it's brilliant that he did that, because this show would simply not be right without him. It wouldn't work if we didn't have William Hartnell in there, even though he is only in it. How much screen time he's in? Literally about 2 minutes, maybe 3 at most.
But it's not even that. It's like, it's a testament that he's not even physically in the scene. He's on a little screen. He's like you can tell it's not brilliant quality camera, whatever they were shooting with, because you can tell all this. But what you said, you get that nobleness from his performance. You get that elder statesman. As soon as he does anything, you get it, and it's just shows his skill.
They've tried to recapture that as recently as just a few months ago, didn't they, Charlotte? You know, David Bradley was very much trying to not just to recapture something of Hartnell's characterization, but also to play that part in obviously a significantly inferior script. But nevertheless, give this stuff to an actor who can recognise those things and knows their part, knows their end of the bargain to bring. Just like you said, Simon, you know, it's a case of this is the task at hand. You know, he was doing it not for a question of ego. It was for the children, for the audience, and I think that's largely, for the most part. I think of no better examples. I know that Tom Baker was yet to come, but these three men, these three actors, the way that they took on this role with so much gusto and with no reference to anybody else's take on the character at all, you know, carving out TV history, just as JT said, it's easy to take it all for granted. It's only when I reflect back that I think, wow, setting a template, setting down these fun foundations for the franchise.
Absolutely.
Bear in mind, though, that at the point of that time, they didn't know this. I mean, they would have all been going, oh my God, this show's been going for 10 years now, but they didn't realize it was going to continue on and on and on until 1989. Nobody knew that was going to happen. No. So they just turned up as jobbing actors into the show. I mean, you know, we know what Patrick was like. He was bang, 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 bang. And because he loved Doctor Who, he said yes as well. So he did that. But they weren't looking at it very much as groundbreaking television. They weren't going to be looking at it as template. I know certainly that the script that Bob and Dave submitted was just a script. It was just a script, which happened to have 2 extra characters that they'd been requested to put in. It was just a script. So I don't think any of them understood the importance of this to this show. And I think that's magical in itself as well, because
but I think the other thing to say, though, Dan, you were just saying that there was no ego on the part of Hartnell to do it. No, I don't think there was any ego, but I honestly think there was an enormous amount of pride. I don't think he was doing it just for the kids. I think he was doing it for himself, not in an egotistical way, but because he was so proud of that part. He was so proud of what he'd done to it. JT, you're correct that nobody thought that it would still be going today. Apart from William Hartnell, he was the one that said this will run forever, it will go forever. So actually, I think there was an enormous amount of pride in he just desperately wanted to appear in that show, not egotistically, but purely through pride. And I think that's lovely. Who can take that away from him? Because he is the governor, he is the template. We wouldn't be sitting here if he hadn't made that part a success.
I suppose all 3 of the leads as well, they shared that history. I wouldn't describe, I suppose Pertwee I probably would describe as career-wise, he'd been a comedian first and an actor second, but they'd all played comedy. They'd all got comedy chops, and it's handy when, just as Crimply and Doubloon says, the script is one of the funniest of the entire series. And that's right. The more you think about it, we came into this stream and even into the green room beforehand, quoting lines and laughing about this because it's that kind of piece, it's that kind of script, and it's completely appropriate that it be like that. I want to mention Katie Manning in this as well. Katie was 27 at this time. She'd done 3 seasons. That's right, 3 seasons alongside Pertwee as Jo Grant. She knew this character inside out, and I was struck watching it this time. Yeah, obviously all eyes are on the Doctor, like we've said. You know, the energy, the sense of occasion. Jo Grant does so much in this. The bits in between, sort of when they fall out, she pulls them back together, and the way that she works, in particular with Patrick Troughton, they immediately get on. He recognizes. I think he recognizes that she's the companion figure, that the next Doctor trusts her, so can he, and there's a wonderful familiarity there with them instantly. It's the most curious thing, and it's one thing for Troughton to play that really well. Troughton was a fantastic actor. He was like in his mid-50s. Katie Manning is still in her mid-20s, and yet she plays it so beautifully, and I don't think I'd ever noticed that about this story before.
Oh,
I think the thing is with this story, you really see the devotion she has to her doctor and Troughton, but I think you especially see it with her doctor. The fact that she's the first one to say, no, I'm coming with you. Or like when he's literally just been eaten up by the multicolored blob. She's straight there. There's no hesitation. And even when he's literally holding her and saying, do not come with me. And you just see that utter devotion in her. And that bravery, actually, that's what I noticed watching it. Yeah, she's so brave in this story.
It's also, isn't it? It's just one of those things where it's just so easy to watch. It's just an easy relationship to watch. And sometimes I get am I the only one out there with modern drama? Just going off on a limb for 2 seconds. Modern drama just does my head in, because I'm fed up of watching drama where all the characters are unpleasant, they're nasty to each other, they're grumpy with each other, they're sniping at each other, they're having a really bad day. I'm just sick of modern drama. It's always horrible characters being horrible to each other. And then you look at this and it's just a joy, and it's nice to watch. And doesn't that make such a breath of fresh air? You don't get television like this anymore, sadly. Simple as that.
No, and you certainly don't get actors like Nicholas Courtney. Talk about a lightness of touch. Talk about somebody who's got no ego there, Ian. You know, he's quite willing. I don't think that the Brigadier is a figure of fun as such, but he does fulfil a certain component part of this and every Doctor Who story. Nick Courtney was in his mid-40s. He'd been playing the Brigadier again since '68, so he'd been playing this role for 5 years, off and on. And I find this, I think this is one of his finest hours, funnily enough, Ian. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the timing of it. Maybe it's Bob and Dave just giving him good stuff. I don't know.
You know what? When I watched this again, I was laughing all the way through it. Not because I thought it was stupid, which some of it is, but I just love all these people that are in it. Seriously, The Brigadier makes me laugh so much. He's so up himself, isn't he? He's just so funny, in my opinion. And when they land, he's like, "Yeah, don't worry, we'll go to so and so," and he doesn't realise he's in a different part of the universe. You know what I mean?
It's that line when they're trying to explain, we think we're somewhere new, and he's like, "What, Norfolk?" On whatever he says, and it's like, "No, we're not in Norfolk." It's just
He's pretty sure it's Chroma. It's a line that's gone down in Doctor Who fan history. Because the Chroma line is infamous now with Doctor Who fans.
And that was ad-libbed, wasn't it, JT? And there was a fair bit of cheeky ad-libbing going on in here. Patrick Troughton also ad-libbed that line where he refers to Omega as a bloke. He repeats.
That's Benton, isn't it? I think that was in the script. The whole thing. I don't know. I can't remember that bit. I don't know if it was scripted.
Benton says, "Can't we nobble this Omega bloke?"
Yeah,
he says, "You're talking about one of the most powerful blokes in the universe," or something like that.
Yeah,
apparently
I'm sure that
line was ad-libbed.
I don't know. I can't comment on that. It doesn't sound like an ad-lib, but I don't know.
I may call you Joe Maintie. That's a line from the second Doctor. It's just beautiful, beautiful stuff. You could say that a story like this is only as palpable.
Anybody notice that John's collars are up all the time? They never go down. The collars are right there. Have you never noticed that about his costume?
Frames his cheekbones.
Yeah. On that particular one, I think that actually suits it. I think it's lovely, you know, that one. But on the others, of course, they were all flat. But it was just nice. I mean, the costumes in this are all wonderful, and we all know who's behind them and what career he went on to. So it's just marvelous. You know,
I think they did it deliberately, didn't they?
Whenever you take the piss out of the jail guards and this people out there, just remember that James Aitchison went on to have a very successful film career. In fact, I think he's won Oscars as well.
He has won Oscars. I love the jail guards. Am I the only one out there that loves the jail guards? I love them. I think they're just a brilliant design. I've never quite understood why they're so reviled. I don't get it.
I know that Bob hated them. He absolutely hated the design. It wasn't what they wanted at all. But also, I think it's quite funny because I don't know if any of you have noticed when you go and watch it, but they can't get through the doors in Omega's palace.
Yeah.
It's a big faux pas there. But I overlook it, but it's quite sweet. You think, oh, I can't say that was basic, that one.
I just loved them as a kid. I mean, okay, maybe if I was to watch them as an adult now for the first time, I might question. But I loved them as a kid. I mean, look at that. What's not to love about that as a kid?
Well, I mean, children would love these horrible great jellies.
Yeah.
You know? They would absolutely love that. And that eye thing inside was actually quite good at the time, wasn't it? Because it did move if you look at it.
Yes.
But there you go. I mean,
Simon, I'm not going to lie. When I first watched it, I was like, "Oh God, it looks like they've got a chocolate crispy cake," and it's like just exploded.
But what's wrong with that? That's good, isn't it?
They are very Doctor Who, though.
They are very when I first saw that as a child, I was absolutely terrified by them. No joking apart, I was even more frightened by the bad guy, by Stephen Thorne as Omega. Big booming Stephen Thorne. Stephen passed away in 2019, but he'd been a British radio, film, stage, TV actor for literally decades. A massive body of work, particularly on radio and audiobooks. 300 audiobooks this man recorded for all kinds of
audio. Yeah, he was trained in audio as well. He did a lot of drama and radio plays, and he loved it. I was lucky enough to meet him, and he was working then. He was doing 2 back-to-back series for the radio, and he was just so passionate about radio plays. And he said, "Oh, there's so much you can do with your voice." And then he gave me an example, and I'm sitting there going, "This is a thrill. This guy's showing me what he can do with his voice. Amazing."
Look at that set, right? It's like they forgot that they ran out of green paint, and they just stopped. He just stopped. So okay, all right, that's enough. Let's go.
Well, that was the BBC in 1973, I suppose.
So I like it. It adds to the whole surrealness.
I don't know this, Charlotte, but what Bob and Dave originally wanted was supposed to be a massive palace, and then what Omega's land was, somebody mentioned Oz earlier, but it was supposed to be lush and fantastical and full of fantasy and all this sort of stuff. But of course, they couldn't do that with the budget. So actually, in the Three Doctors novelization written by Terence, he puts in the excuse there that once upon a time it had been this and this and very grand and that, but through time, and Omega had not noticed that because his will was diminishing, so was his world.
See, that makes sense, because that's, to be honest, I remember watching it, I was thinking it makes sense that his palace is so lovely because that's his home. That's where his power is going to be concentrated, and everything else side, it doesn't reach as far. That was my little headcanon when I was watching it.
Yeah, well, that's fair. Can I give you a bit about Omega from Bob himself? I've got a bit here. I hunted out for this show. This is Bob's autobiography. It's called K9 Stole My Trousers. It's still available from Phantom Publishing. And in this, he talks about Omega. And he says, Omega was one of the best megalomaniacs we'd written. A hero, I could have been a god. He was based on an idea in a book by Aldous Huxley called Time Must Have a Stop, about a being who existed only by his own willpower. He was only an awareness of an awareness. Omega was an outrageous and rather sad figure who has certainly made his mark on the series, being used in some later stories, and to this day still appears in independent Doctor Who DVDs and CDs. There you go.
Perfectly summarized. Yeah, a very memorable bad guy that people do keep clamoring to come back. You know, fans really want this character back by whatever means, and you can see why when he's made such a big impact in so few appearances. Stephen Thorne's voice, I'm not surprised that was his sort of stock trade, the voice work. But he was a very, very big man as well, wasn't he? He'd been in the Demons, hasn't he? He played Azal in the Demons. I mean, I know he wasn't quite as tall as they managed to superimpose him to be in that, but he was a big fella. He was a big unit. And next to the Doctors, even Pertwee wasn't a little bloke, was he? No. But he's still very physically formidable as well, and that was probably essential to the character too. But Thorne also appeared in Zcast, Crossroads, all those kind of shows that were big at the time, and movies too. And he carried on appearing on television right the way up through the 90s too. And he was in Last of the Summer Wine and the BBC's David Copperfield and things like that. So this is a guy who had a big career. But
I forgot the bit where they took the mask off and there was nothing left of him. I forgot about that bit. When I was watching it again, I was like, oh, yes, of course. It's just his world that exists now. Yeah, that was quite
such a powerful moment in the whole story, because that's when you know that, hang on a minute, this guy's going to go OTT any second now. I actually get quite frightened at that point when I first saw it, because I thought, he's not. Hang on, he's not happy.
He's not going to take that well.
No.
Well, it is. I mean, that is very nightmarish as well for kids to see that. I remember being deeply disturbed by that as a kid. It's pretty horrendous. That's pretty horrific.
Well, it sort of gives you ideas of the Headless Horseman, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just not a good one for a kid to have.
Just the fact that he thinks that it's all, it's just going to be a little bit bad. Because,
Harassed.
You might need a bit of face cream, but no, it's more
when
than
they
that.
when they lift the helmet up, I still see some. I see some of you, like Stephen. Is it Stephen Thorne?
Yeah.
The guy, some of his curly hair is actually. You can tell he was actually in the role. Is then actually sticking out of the thing.
You can see a little bit of it there.
Yeah.
But the brilliant thing about Doctor Who back then is it wasn't frightened to scare the kids, because that was part of British culture. Children, I'm sure they do to this day as well, but they do like a little bit of a scare. They like a bit of a thrill. And the whole thing about Doctor
as a kid.
As we went through it, the whole thing about Doctor Who and being scared was you knew you were going to be okay because the Doctor and the companion were there. In this story, you had 3 of them and the companion and the brig. You were perfectly safe. You were going to be okay.
Yeah.
Another thing I noticed.
You remember the scary bits, don't you? You remember them more
of course
than
you do. They're the things that etch themselves on your soul. Another thing I noticed about watching this on Blu-ray for the first time, Simon, I thought you'd appreciate this, is that the TARDIS console is definitely a light green.
It is.
I know. I can't believe I never noticed it before. But yes, keep the comments coming. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check you're still subscribed. You know the drill. And hit the cloister bell to get the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it, whether it's another event show like this, our regular weekly magazine format live streams where we dig into the news and we have regular features and discussions and we invite people in as well. Well, I say invite. Blackmail, really. Twist a few arms, that kind of thing. We pull people in to our TARDIS and get them rattling on about Doctor Who 2. It's time to do some rattling of our own now, rattling back through time to get some of the flavour of the 4:3 TV era when everybody was glued to those CRTs that were far, far smaller. That's why they didn't put as much into the set scene, because tellies were so small and they were largely stuck in the corner of the room, not above the fire like people put them now. But the height of sophistication way back then, I think, was if you'd got a remote control that was connected by a wire to the front of the telly. And there was that, and also crispy pancakes. They were just coming into, so that was pretty sophisticated too. Okay, so we're going to take a look back now to 1973 for the Type 40 Live ad break here. So enjoy these ads. Go for a wee, or go and top yourself up, or whatever else, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes with more of our discussion of the 3 Doctors. So yeah, whatever it is and whatever you like, we'll be right here for more. So see you in a couple of minutes.
My wife left me last week. Now behave yourself. Bored stiff, she said. Same old things to cook every day. But look what I found. Finder's crispy pancakes. A completely new idea. A lovely crispy pancake with steak and kidney inside, or smoked haddock or cheese. New Finder's crispy pancakes. If you're out there, Florence, come home. It's more fun now. Every day is pancake day with Finder's crispy pancakes.
I'm a secret lemonade drinker.
Always.
I'm trying to give it up, but it's one of those nights.
Always
lemonade. I'm a secret lemonade drinker.
Always
lemonade. Always lemonade.
Tom and I, we know you don't have to be big and flashy to make a good impression. Modesty, taste, good breeding, a beautiful personality. These are what count. You'll find all that in Tom Thumb, and in 1 or 2 people, usually the smaller ones. Tom Thumb cigars. You don't have to be big to be beautiful.
Introducing Allegro, the new driving force from Austin. What's that? Are we going to demonstrate this car? Let's do it properly, shall we? Allegro, with a revolutionary hydrogas suspension system. Front, in, back, spurs in the rug. Oh, yes, sir. No problem. The unique suspension needs no regular maintenance. Allegro, radial tire. 5 gears on the top model. Front wheel drive for better handling and load holding. And front disc brakes. Not all your roads are motorways, are they, sir? Allegro, with power up to 1750. Allegro, 4 engine sizes in a range of 12 different models. Enjoy the ride, sir? Good, it isn't. What do you suggest?
Can we try the blue one?
Allegro, the new driving force from Austin.
Ready to castle, Captain, sir? We're the anchor. We're the anchor.
2 stone, 6 pound.
Correct. Captain, sir, I'm breaking out the tea bags, sir. Stow them if they're not PG tips.
Only these tea bags have the famous PG Tips tea taste. PG Tips tea bags, for the tea you can really taste.
The wind's coming up.
Captain Hampstead, duck. Duck? There she goes. Oh!
Come back to Type 40 Live, your live streamed Doctor Who show here. I'm deep in the bowels, I suppose, of the Time Lord capital, where we're staring out at the void here and bringing back memories of the 3 Doctors and all that mythology, those wonderful performances, great lines, and everything else we associate with these landmark episodes of our favourite TV show. The panel is still here too. I've got Ian David Diaz, JT, Matt Potts, Simon Horn, and Charlotte Shields here too. And we're reliving our memories, whether it's the first time we've seen the story this week or whether we watched it back there on transmission 50 years ago. All matters and anti-matters are here for discussion. I'll leave you a couple of seconds for the laugh. Hey! Yes. And yeah, we're going to get stuck into more memories now of that which surrounds this wonderful story. Of course I am. And in my experience, if you want to make a beeline for the most information, there's one volume in particular that's lined with gold. Always head for that. The bookmark will definitely be there on the page that you want, and it's always found under the arm of Simon Horton. I can only be talking about the Doctor Who diary. Of course I am. Hey, back again. So yeah, the diary, special diary.
Yeah, welcome to another special edition of the diary, focusing solely on the 3 Doctors and the 10th anniversary year in particular. We did this for the 5 Doctors a few months ago, so if you haven't seen that one, go and find our dedicated 5 Doctors show, which was a pretty good show as well, on the Spacebook YouTube page. But yeah, today we're looking specifically at the 10th anniversary year of 1973, and here's a little factoid to start off with. By the time at this point in the show's lifetime, there'd already been 64 stories and more than 300 episodes. So that's it was on a roll. It was definitely doing well. And the anniversary year, of course, kicked off with the 3 Doctors, which we're talking about. It started actually, the 3 Doctors began broadcasting on the 30th of December 1972, so just into the previous year, and finished on the 20th of January 1973. So we've actually, on this show, we've actually just missed the actual anniversary of the 3 Doctors by about a month or so. But they missed it by 10 months. So I'm not going to worry too much, because they were actually 10 months too early for November when it would have gone out. But they, as JT said, Barry Letts and Terence Dix always like to kick off the season with a real showstopper and an attention grabber. And this was the one that kicked off the 10th anniversary season.
Makes sense in context, doesn't it?
Completely. Why wouldn't you do it? Of course, they weren't thinking from the point of view, we need to tie it in with the anniversary year or anything like the November date itself. They just wanted a showstopper to get people, to get bums on seats, as they always used to say.
They weren't on in November either. Let's face it.
What's that? Sorry, JT?
They weren't on in November either.
No, they weren't on in November. Absolutely. In those days, it didn't go out then.
The schedule was the schedule, wasn't it? And that was that.
Yeah, absolutely. One little interesting fact about the Three Doctors is it's the very first use of the term "it's bigger on the inside," which is so. Again, we've got Bob Baker and Dave Martin, or maybe it's a Terrence Dix rewrite. I don't know, but we've got this story certainly to thank for that line that now everybody just assumes was around forever. Well, it wasn't. It wasn't around.
Took it for granted again watching it this time.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was the first time you'd heard that. A little, just to prick one little myth that still seems to perpetuate out there is that William Hartnell was not. He did not record his stuff sitting in a perspex box in his garage with a curtain behind him. That myth did the rounds for years, and still
even I heard that one.
Mm. Yeah, no, it was all shot in Ealing, and that's exactly where this photo was taken, Dan. This photo was on the same day, obviously, that William Hartnell did his stuff. There's this beautiful story of William Hartnell being literally chauffeured to Ealing Studios in a chauffeur-driven car. They rolled out the red carpet for him.
If that's the case, and that was all filmed on the same day, then how come they just didn't have a scene with all three of them together in the same space?
He's trapped in a time eddy. He's nowhere near.
Yeah,
I know, but I just.
Now, I know what you're saying, Matt, and
really.
Maybe you would have done. Maybe in hindsight, maybe they might have taken the opportunity to do that.
The optimistic part of me says that whenever I see pictures of these three actors together, particularly that photo shoot against that sort of weird mottled 1970s backdrop, they almost look like scenes from a story that we never got. And
yes, in a way,
every time I see, and there's lots of them, they're always finding new pics from that shoot, and whenever I see a new one, I'm sort of transfixed by it. There they are, all three of them together. Hartnell visibly older, Troughton a little older, but all three of them back in character and in costume and together and connected, and the same man, but three different blokes. It's the power of this character that made me a fan.
And as I said, I just love these particular photos. That there are quite a few of these publicity photos taken at Ealing, somewhere in Ealing. I don't know whether it's on a car park or in a garden round the corner or whatever, but it's somewhere near Ealing on the day that they filmed the William Hartnell stuff. And I just love that. Yeah, as Paul Murray says, Hartnell is beaming in that picture. That's the pride I'm talking about. He was just that. Yeah. I think that was the pinnacle of his life. It was the fact that he'd established the character. He'd legitimized the program. It was still going 10 years later, and he was there for the party. And
that was rare for a drama, wasn't it? To be continuing after 10 years.
Yeah,
not in the UK. No, there were other precedents there. Things like Coronation Street.
Yeah, I was thinking about
so there were other things. Said Cars was about 4,000 years old by that point as well.
I've never seen that one.
Crossroads was coming up from the Midlands. That was on its way. There were quite a lot.
Interesting.
But anyway, moving on. Dan, you mentioned those photographs of the three doctors in that weird background, and of course that was from the Radio Times photo shoot at the time. And so, within this anniversary, we had two covers for Doctor Who on the Radio Times, and the first one was for the three doctors that came out. There we go, the 30th of December 1972 to the 5th of Jan 73. And so there you can see that psychedelic background that they used, and I love that photo on the left. And of course, that photo was particularly interesting in that it followed the previous year. John Pertwee's nose was very, very much put out of joint because the Radio Times cover for Terror of the Autons had favoured Roger Delgado over him. And so the Barry Letts at the time said to the Radio Times photographer, for goodness sakes, just make sure John Pertwee is clearly the star in this photo, which is why he's the top and the other two are down below. But it's a lovely photo, and the three of them, I think the first and second Doctors in particular, the lighting on them is just stunning. They just look...
I always thought that was a painting, way back. I know it's a photo now, but I always thought it was a painting or something. It didn't really exist in the real universe. They never ever got back. They never actually ever got together as such. and to find out that they actually were all in the same room, it blows my mind.
I don't know. I wonder whether I don't know whether those photos for the Radio Times were taken on the same day as the Ealing shoot. I'm not certain on that. But anyway, as I say, there were two covers. There's the second cover on the right. Yeah, incredibly, two covers for Doctor Who and the Radio Times in this year, and this one, the one on the right, is from the very end of the year. So they literally had almost the sort of the first and the last issues in this year for Doctor Who, because the one on the right is for the Time Warrior. So it's from the 15th to the 21st of December 73. So it was the first story of the 11th season with Liz Sladen coming in as Sarah Jane. I never quite understood that particular cover. It never made a lot of sense to me. I still don't know why we've got Michael Parkinson and who's the singer there? Whose name
Vanessa Miles, and that's Paul Jones.
Paul Jones, thank you. And his son, for some bizarre reason, his son. Why they're there looking at John Pertwee? It's a weird cover.
It was to do with the schedules, because Parkinson was coming back for his latest series on Saturday nights, and I think Paul Jones and I don't know about his son, but I think Paul Jones, they were doing some other sort of drama or something as well.
Right.
So they were all included in that issue. They were all interviewed or something.
Oh,
in that
so his
issue.
son's an actor. He just didn't want to come along to a Doctor Who shoot.
No, I do remember seeing an interview with his son, and he literally said, "Yeah, well, I was just dragged in. I didn't even know who John Pertwee was. I was just kind of shoehorned in." I think there is kind of a cute story behind that one. But as I say, that was the Radio Times, two covers in this year. But of course, the big Radio Times release for this anniversary year was this little beauty, the 1973 10th anniversary Radio Times special that came out in November. This did come out in November of 73. Is that the
original?
I'd love to tell you this is the original. It's not. It's in far too good condition. So this is the reprint. I was delighted that they did actually still keep the 30 pence down the bottom there as the price. They didn't change that on the reprint. But no, this is the reprint. But it's all exactly as it was. I love all this at the beginning, and again, JT, you pointed this out in our Five Doctors special, how they copied the 20th anniversary special, copied the 10th, and it did. There's another fantastic
beautiful
photo from the Radio Times.
I've never bought this, and I completely missed the reprint, and I'm sort of kicking myself now. I don't know what I was thinking.
When the reprint came out, was it the 50th?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Came out a little before then. I'm pretty sure it came out a little bit before then. It was when the new series had just really hit its stride in the David Tennant years. So.
Could be. Yeah, you could be right, actually. I'll have a look at it and see if there's a date. This piece of artwork I just particularly love, if you can make that out.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
This regenerative transition between the three dots.
I love that on a cup.
It's kind of funky, psychedelic 70s artwork. There's some really loopy photos in this. This one of Carol Ann Ford, always slightly questionable. Why, we've got Carol Ann Ford naked in some.
There was pictures, exclusive shoots for most of the characters, weren't there? In this, there was Nick Courtney and Liz Shaw there, and I know that.
This is the one. The one that I find particularly disturbing is the one with Peter Purvis in. It's just like, what is all that about?
That is a Pink Floyd album cover as well, isn't it? Gatefold album cover.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. I'm clearly not up on my Pink Floyd.
No, it's what it reminds me of. It's that kind of era.
I see what you mean. Maybe. This is my favourite. I just love this one of Ben and Polly with the Cybermen being chased after by the Cybermen.
It's really nice that they went back and got these cast members together again for these shoots.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. What's that? Sorry, JT?
It was 10 years old, so I love the fact that the Radio Times actually adored the show so much to do that, because obviously they lost it years and years later. But then they repeated it, as we said in the Five Doctors one. They repeated the exact same format in '83.
Yes.
I think the reprint is around about 93, believe it or not. I can't see a date in it, but I'm sure it's about the 40th or something.
I mean, what's lovely is the fact that actually when they did reprint it, they haven't changed a thing in it. They haven't even put the current date in it, which I think is brilliant. So it is identical to the original. There's a really loopy story in here as well by Terry Nation for the Daleks, with some really loopy 70s artwork in as well. And it's an odd story because it tells the origins of the Daleks as being descended from humans, which completely contradicts his original Dalek script, and then completely contradicts Genesis of the Daleks, which he would write the following year. Terry Nation never worried too much about canon. It wasn't.
It's interesting as well, Simon, that the reprint edition, which we both have here, the reprint edition is now a collector's item in itself. I've seen this recently. I've seen this recently at a collector's fair, and they wanted £55 for it. So if you've got the reprint edition, look after it.
Is it a cardboard cover? I'm just wondering. Is that a cardboard?
No, it's still paper cover. The original, so the original sometimes does come up on eBay. You can pay about £100 for a good condition original.
I've long since abandoned any hopes I had of owning this little item, but it is a beautiful thing, and the photography in particular, it seems really, really special to me.
Oh, it is a magnificent thing, and of course that photograph there has often been aped. They've done various other shoots with various other doctors in similar kind of positions. It's become very.
Am I right in thinking that this is the first time that any kind of episode guide was properly offered as well?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think, when did the making of Doctor Who come out? The original.
The book of it came out. Piccolo published it in 1972.
Okay, so this would actually be the second in that case, Dan.
Yeah, the reprint came after, didn't it? But I don't recall an episode guide in the original Piccolo one. It's a while since I've gone and looked at it.
Oh, you might be right, actually.
They would have an episode.
When I say an episode guide, I mean more sort of acknowledging which story came after which.
This was the first one, then.
Yeah, but it's just a bit strange.
I think there's kind of fictional
much about the episodes. If the BBC didn't care much about the episodes, I'm just amazed that they'd actually even list them.
Well,
they did care about it in those days. It's just a beautiful piece, and if you do ever manage to get hold of a copy, it's a cracking piece of work. So that came out, as I say, November 1973. Now, also coming out in 1973 were the first 3 Target books. We forget this. The Daleks, the Crusaders, and the Zarbi all came out on the 2nd of May 1973. These were released. Of course, the Daleks had been published previously back in, I think, 64 or 65, but the reprint under the Target imprint, along with the Zarbi and the Crusaders, all came out in 1973. And of course, JT has got a copy of this little beastie behind him. So this was the novelisation of the 3 Doctors. This didn't come out until the 20th of November 1975. So they almost hit the 12th anniversary with this. And this
is that an original cover?
Yeah, this is a first edition with the Chris Achilleos cover. Just a work of absolute genius. One of my favourite book covers of all time. It's just.
I remember when this
was inspired by Jack Kirby's famous Fantastic
Four. I was thinking the same thing, Dan.
I remember when this hardback book arrived in my school library and wetting myself because the cover sold the story to me absolutely, because it just told me everything I needed to know. Here's the 3 Doctors with a baddie, and I remember looking at that and having to have it out of the school library constantly. And what an iconic cover that is! It's absolutely stunning.
It is. It's just magnificent. It's beautiful. Everything about it is just perfect, even down to the black logo. It's always surprised me. Why did they put a black logo at the top? I don't know, but it works brilliantly. It's just amazing.
Tail, isn't it? He's trying to get the bubble gum out of their hair. That's what he's trying to do.
No, it's top and tail, Simon. The black logo works with the black of the.
You're quite right. That's exactly what it is. It balances so perfectly, doesn't it? I'm just going to literally read you. This just shows the genius of Terry Sticks. I'm going to read you literally about 3 or 4 lines out of this, because we talked earlier about how the production budget maybe ran a little bit short and didn't allow quite what Bob and Dave would have liked. Terrance Dicks kind of remedies this somewhat. I remember reading this as a kid, and it sold it to me. In front of them, the grey desert had levelled out, and there, in the middle distance, stood a towering castle. It seems to have been beaten from solid brass. Hundreds of towers and slender minarets glinted dully beneath the lowering purple sky, giving the whole place a look of oriental opulence, like the Arabian Nights castle of some caliph. The massive main gates were open. Inside, they could see only blackness. Oh, Terrance Dicks, genius. Thank you very much for that, Terrance. Beautiful, beautiful prose. So there were the reprints.
Several copies of this, Simon. I've got the one that you've got there, but the first one that I had was the reissue, that first reissue there.
With the Jeff Cummins cover.
Yeah, Jeff's cover, yeah.
Which is equally beautiful, but it's just not as dramatic, is it? Let's be honest. There's drama in the.
It's interesting though that the Achilles cover does not work on its reprint with the BBC Penguin version. It's just lost. It's lost.
Yeah.
They've mucked it up completely on that one.
Yeah, agreed. Well, it needs the background. It needs that lurid 70s background to go with it. Simple as that.
It does. I'm very fond of Alistair Pearson's one that he did for the reissues, the Blue Spines, as they call them. But yeah, for me, it was the Jeff Cummins one was the first one I bought. Again, similar experience to you in the school library there, JT. I think I saw it in Smiths, though. I have to have that because I'd seen the story on the television not that long before. And yes, I had to have that. And I do think one of my sons might have that reissue there from a few years ago with the golden logo and the introduction there, the new introduction. But
well, Simon Ashley asks in the chat, is it still possible to get hold of copies of it? Yeah, I think it is. You'd certainly get this particular copy, the original one with the Chris Achilles cover. You can still get that on eBay. They don't go for a fortune. You get one for sort of 10 or 15 quid in really good condition. They're not a fortune. But I think, JT, you're the guy to ask for this. Isn't that reprint as well still available?
Oh, absolutely. You can get all versions of this. You can get there were 2 reprints of the original Achilles cover. There were 2 of the Jeff Cummins one, and the BBC Penguin one is still in print. You can still get it from various people. Try the usual stockists, Galaxy 4, the Who Shop, all that sort of stuff. You can get them. But also, I would now try the Comic Con Marks. I shouldn't mention that, but the comic marketplaces. Yeah. And also, if you're around, do check out your jumble sales and also your charity shops. There's a hell of a lot of Doctor Who stuff making its way into charity shops. Now, I'm finding some really interesting stuff. Really? So, yeah, you can still get them. You just have to hunt for them.
But they're not that hard to hunt down, and it's highly recommended. This is definitely one of Terrance's best, simply because he really does a good elaboration job on the original script, purely in the description of it, and it is a big budget film in the Terrance Dicks version, so highly recommended. Finally today on the diary, 1963, we have to talk about one gentleman, and that is the great late Roger Delgado. For the simple fact that we lost him, bless him, in the anniversary year. We lost Roger Delgado in 1973. He died at just age 55. And so this year actually marks the 50th anniversary of Roger Delgado's death. So it just seemed, although he's not in the Three Doctors, we can't talk about it in 1973 diary and not mention this guy. As I say, 50 years since he died. And also, more poignantly, he would have been 105 yesterday. It was his birthday yesterday, and he would have been 105. Roger, here we go. Hold on to your hats. Roger Caesar Marius Bernard de Delgado Torres Castillo Roberto, to give him his full name. You won't be surprised to find that his parents were French and Spanish. But ironically, he was born in 1918 in Whitechapel, within the sound of Bow Bells.
He's an East End.
An East End boy. And one of my favourite roles that Roger Delgado played was in one of my favourite films, Horror Express, from 1972. The year before we're talking, 1 year ago in 1972, Horror Express. And I'm going to challenge anybody in the chat to tell me what part he plays in Horror Express. About 1 minute. Don't go and look it up.
I was really shocked when I saw him in The Bells of St. Trinians, and he was only in it for like seconds as a bit part, and I was like, he should be in the whole show.
He does a lot of stuff that people don't that you don't realise he's in.
Working actor.
A jobbing actor.
He played different parts too, which was amazing. You know, different sorts of
the best master
parts.
ever.
Oh, undoubtedly the best master.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I suppose nowadays, obviously, when it's anniversaries, we get used to them throwing the kitchen sink at it, and you think, why wasn't the master in the Three Doctors? But you know, thinking back to the mindset at the time, why would he be in it? We've got our villain, we've got our story. There's only so much screen time. You wouldn't want an actor like Roger Delgado to play second fiddle to anybody. But I think when you show the Three Doctors to people who haven't seen it before, I mean, what do you think, Charlotte? Do you think that it's strange to not have such a big component part of the setup there at the time?
I enjoyed it more because it was more restrained from what I'm used to as an anniversary story. Like, I actually found it a lot more funner to watch because I didn't feel like I was getting bombarded with so many characters and references, and obviously
people
there is some
every corner.
Yeah, like we said, we've got the recorder, we've got Jelly Bay. There is references, but it's very sparse, and I actually think that's in the future. I think they need to go maybe look to this story more as an example of less is more. And you can still have these big characters like an Omega. You can still have things like the Time Lords and Gallifrey and all the sort of things we know. But you need to make sure you've got a really good, just working story with the characters you've got. It's like, I adore
enough
Fraser
reason for them to be there.
Yeah, it's like I love Jamie and the Second Doctor. But if I really think about this, I think you could maybe just about fit one more character, and that probably would have been Fraser's Jamie, because you could have had him as just either like with Troughton a bit more, or have him in the mix. But if you chucked in like another companion or somebody like the Master, you'd just be eating up each other's screen time.
Yeah, in a sense, Charlotte, Benton took the Jamie role.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking afterwards. I was like, that's probably what Jamie would have been doing.
Yeah. As a kid, Benton used to be. I know you had the Doctor that was always the protector, but I knew when Benton was around that everything was going to be okay. That's a strange thing. Like when I was like a little toddler, and no, I just loved his character so much. So yeah, I mean, he really filled that role.
Well, to put you out of your misery, there is one person in the chat who has got it right. Some excellent guesses there. But Crimpling to Bloom, well done. You have got it right. He doesn't appear on screen once. He plays the voice of the Inspector. The Inspector, poor guy, is dubbed. And Roger Delgado takes the role and does the dubbing. So that's where he's throughout the entirety of Horror Express. And if you haven't seen Horror Express, go and watch it. It's a brilliant film. And now, once you watch it, you'll immediately tell. Of course, it's Roger Delgado doing the voice of the police inspector. Anyway, well done, Crimpling to Bloom. You win an award. I don't know
if anyone was going to get it. It was Crimpling to Bloom, because of course he is the font of all knowledge when it comes to these things. And have a look at the shows, because Crimpling to Bloom, he will always put things. He will always put references as to who's in what the following week. It's amazing.
Horror Express was made in Italy, wasn't it?
It was made in Spain. It was Spain. Okay. It was made in Barcelona, remarkably, but it's set in Russia and partially in China. It's a mad film with Telly Savalas chewing the scenery and spitting it out again. Utterly brilliant. Go and watch it. Anyway, back at the chase, Roger Delgado, as I say, bless him, we lost him 50 years ago this year, and he would have been 105 yesterday. God, we salute you, Roger. We really do. Happy birthday, Roger, wherever you are.
Couldn't agree more. Lots of messages in the chat saying exactly the same thing, live on YouTube and Facebook. Generally, the general angle is that Roger Delgado was the governor, is still the governor, the best master, the ultimate master, Ian. And it's just a flurry of praise and affection for that man, even after 50 years.
He was the best master. Let's face it. Today's masters, they got nothing on him.
Correct.
No.
Again, you kind of wonder again, you wonder, is there a single Doctor Who fan out there who doesn't adore Roger Delgado? I don't think you can like Doctor Who and not adore Roger Delgado.
Simon, there's only one way to find out. What have they got to do?
They've got to like and subscribe. That's what they've got to do.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you for putting the diary together, as always, Simon. It was a pleasure. Yeah, and please do let us know what you think of all of that. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the cloister bell to get all the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it. Cheers for the diary, Simon. What a story! What a time! What a year in Doctor Who history! And what a bunch of gentlemen and ladies that helped bring it all to the screen too. There.
And just really, really quickly, sorry, Crimpling the Gloom says in the chat that apparently Horror Express is on iPlayer and YouTube. You've got no excuse. There's your homework for next week. Go and watch Horror Express. Thanks, Crimpling.
That is one strange movie.
I just want to give a shout out there to Chris Chatfield in the shout there as well. Chris, I am very jealous because he's got both the original Radio Times 10th anniversary and the reprint. And he said that his original is in absolute pristine condition. My original isn't, and I've had to put it in a plastic bag, and I spent £150 on it many, many moons ago. So I'm so jealous of you, Chris. Congratulations on a little bit.
We need photos. We want photos of that. Photos.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I think I've just got to accept the fact that I'll never own that. I will just have to settle with a PDF and with the admiring yoga. Lots of my stuff is in little plastic bags. Lots of my Doctor Who bits and bobs. I always say it's to stop them from having babies and to stop me from messing them up even more so. Yes, so please let us know what you think of our big Three Doctors extravaganza here on the channel, on the show this time. We're digging into all corners of the occasion itself, that 4-part story from December 1972 into January there that marked the 10th anniversary of our favourite TV show, Doctor Who, whenever it was that we saw it. Charlotte only saw it this week, didn't you? Have you enjoyed being on the show this time? What's it been like with the old boys here hanging out? It must be like it must be like taking us all down the seafront and giving us all toffees and stuff.
Oh no, I love you lot, even though I'm usually the younger voice, but that's fun. So I'll see you all next week.
You're a very tolerant and patient woman, Charlotte. Thank you for your
company as
always. We'll see you next time.
Bye, Charlotte.
I'm too young to have seen this on first transmission, but it was one of the highlights. It was one of the highlights of my childhood too. It would be criminal, really, next to criminal, to finish a conversation about the Three Doctors without acknowledging the 5 faces of Doctor Who, and what a big part of that celebration the Three Doctors was. It was one of 5 stories that JNT personally selected each of those, didn't he, JT, that was going to represent each era, and the idea was it would walk people like me, who'd only ever known Tom Baker, to the new Doctor, to Peter Davison. The Three Doctors, I love all of those stories that were part of that season, but the Three Doctors just kind of blew my mind, really. I just met these characters, and then they were all coming together like that.
Yeah, and John did that deliberately, of course, because, as you say, the whole thing about the 5 Faces of Doctor Who in 1981, in that autumn season, if you like, was to re-inform the public, and especially the young ones, that there had been more Doctors other than Tom, because the majority of us have grown up with Tom. So that was the whole purpose. And the Three Doctors were, was one of the ones he came with originally, apart from the first one. Oh, we've got to have the first one, and then we've got to have the Three Doctors, because it just sold it all. It was to be able to say, look, here they are together in a cracking story. So of course he was going to go for that one, and it was just brilliant. And as I say, for me, that's why the Three Doctors is also extremely special, because that was the first time I saw it as part of that wonderful season. It was amazing.
I remember watching, obviously I watched the entire season. I didn't miss a single one of the 5 Faces stories, but I saw, so it was the Unearthly Child, then the Crotons, and then was it Carnival of Monsters? That was the third one, and then the Three Doctors.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, and they were showing trailers, weren't they, throughout the run? So I think I'd watched Carnival of Monsters, and either directly after or within a day or two, I saw a trailer for which story was coming next. And I was like, what? I had no idea this story even existed. I'd only just got used to the idea that there'd been other Doctors. No, because I'd seen John Pertwee on an annual that I'd got from a jumble sale, and it kind of looked like the same show, but it wasn't, and everything looked a little bit different. And so to see it all come to life like this, again, a master stroke from John Nathan Turner. This prepped me. It prepped me for the Peter Davison era, but also prepped me unbeknownst to me. And maybe John, I don't know how early he was thinking of the Five Doctors.
No, it was about this time. It was about this time. He knew when he was putting this together that 1983 was on the horizon. He didn't know if it was going to be there, but there was a method to John's madness as well, because you're right. When 83 comes along, those of us who've seen the Three Doctors are very aware that this can happen, and we're a bit more comfortable with it. But that's our other show. Go and have a look at that.
And interestingly, John Nathan Turner swapped Carnival of Monsters and the Three Doctors round specifically so that the Three Doctors sat on the anniversary date. Yeah. He knew what he was doing, did John Nathan Turner? You got to hand him that.
A lot of the time he did, yeah.
Maybe, I'm going to qualify that. Sometimes he did.
That passed me by at the time, and even now, I hadn't realised that until you just told me that it was actually shown on the anniversary date.
Yeah.
Paul Murray was lucky enough to see this in 1980 at a local group meeting. That was the year before the Five Faces, so he got lucky there.
Yeah.
Troughton's, everybody loves Troughton's face. Look, the lines on Troughton's face, very craggy, aren't they, Matt? But perfectly arranged. A very handsome man, if a very peculiar man, the way that he moved, how idiosyncratic he was. He couldn't have been anything but an actor, could he?
Yeah, well, I mean, this was the first story that I ever saw him in. So I had no idea of, the previous Doctors actually at the time, because, I mean, I was 4 at the time. So I was wondering why Tom Baker wasn't in it, to be honest. And I couldn't read, so I didn't know it was called The Three Doctors. But, because I was like, if these guys are the Doctors, so where's Tom Baker, But, he just had something special, and he was so much of a contrast to John Pertwee. You were just going, obviously these guys aren't going to get along, even though they're the same person, and they just played so well. And, I like for the longest time since, Patrick Troughton's stories weren't available, a lot of them, I'd only ever seen him in this and probably the Two Doctors as well, and the Five Doctors. So, it was something special when I finally got to see some of his earlier stuff before he was in, the Three Doctors, and to show that, he was the same character, and he just fitted in like a pair of gloves, really.
And it's interesting because that photo that you just showed it there with John and Patrick back to back has just reminded me that Chris Achilleos always said that his favourite Doctor to draw was Patrick Troughton because of the lines on his face. And for the first time ever, I've only just noticed that picture of Patrick Troughton, I think, is the reference photo that he used for the Abominable Snowmen cover. Yeah. And I've never noticed that before. And I say, Chris always said that he was brilliant to paint because of that craggy face, because of the lines.
Yes, iconic, that back-to-back look. I mean, I don't know if you remember the advertising campaigns during the David Tennant era, the original David Tennant era. Every week, JT, there was a publicity picture of him back-to-back with either a companion or a guest star, but this was the original, wasn't it? It's like, come on, have a go. Bring on your gel guards, bring on Omega and black holes and whatever. We've got it covered. You'll be okay with us, with the Doctors.
Yeah.
Starsky and Hutch. Yeah. But a dandy and a clown version, of course.
Ah, well, that's interesting. You mentioned that because that wasn't the original line. And again, I'm gonna quote here from Bob in his autobiography. He goes on to say that the Three Doctors was provisionally titled The Black Hole, as we were saying earlier, being a new discovery at the time, which filled us with ideas about singularity and event horizons. I think we felt that we'd got the characters of the three super egos satisfactorily with a good exchange of cynical or disparaging quips. So you're my replacements, a dandy and a clown. We'd originally wanted it to be a hairdresser and a clown, but it was thought by the producer to be going a little too far.
Please. A hairdresser and a clown.
Well, at least not a dentist.
Yeah, John would have loved that line, wouldn't he?
Yeah, certainly would.
Not really, no.
So there's a shot in the Three Doctors where Troughton comes out the TARDIS, and you could see him standing there, and you can see inside the TARDIS. Yeah. And I don't know whether they deliberately did that and said those were the doors that were shut.
No.
But you can see there's nothing in the TARDIS.
Yeah, so they didn't do deliberately.
All right. So I'm assuming that what we see is the doors shut, the TARDIS doors. That's, before you go into the TARDIS. That's what I'm assuming. But yeah, it looks like a mistake, and it probably was.
It is. But back then, of course, they didn't realize it was going to be seen.
Yeah.
All these years later. And they didn't realize it was going to. I mean, it's like all these people used to say all the time. We did it to be shown once. They didn't realize it was going to be repeated. It was going to be on VHS. It was going to be on DVD. They didn't realize it was going to be on Blu-ray. They didn't realize we would all be talking about it and their legacies all this year later. So it was a mistake simply because of the director, Lenny, the wonderful Lenny Mayne, just not getting it and concentrating more on Troughton's performance rather than what the back of the police. So it's one of those things where you have to hold your disbelief there, and you have to just imagine the fact that when the doors are closed or something, fans can get around that some way, but you do have to have a little bit of faith there, don't you? And
also another thing that I noticed was that all the stuff that with Hartnell was shot on film.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, isn't it? Because it was just going to be seen on a monitor on a BBC.
Well, it was out of TV Centre.
Yeah,
but in those days, if you went out of TV Centre, you had to film. You had to use film. If you were inside, you had the video. Yeah. And it was down to technology, wasn't it? The equipment and stuff like that. But it always jarred with them.
It's funny because that's a BBC monitor, and they put colours that I can cover the switches on the.
It's like when he keeps veering off to the right all the time, and I'm like, are you looking at a character, or are you able to see? I was just like, or is he reading lines?
I mean, literally,
I know.
It's now funny how
TARDIS, couldn't they, and put the TARDIS in there, because it goes off to the back, doesn't it? The TARDIS, so they could easily open up that side, put the TARDIS props in there, so it looks like it's bigger.
I could have done
it.
It was space time and not understanding. As I say, they were doing it to get the children's slot on a Saturday afternoon filled. Get it in the can. And of course, the plug. I think. Am I right in saying that in those days it wasn't 10 o'clock they had to finish, but it was something like 8 or 7? It was even earlier.
I think it was 7. I think it was 7 o'clock.
I think it was 7 o'clock. Yeah, and, because the trade unions were really powerful then at that point, weren't they, as well? So it was one of those things. They just didn't have the time or the money or anything like that.
It's funny, isn't it? Because we're now several decades on from that language of making television. I mean, I noticed just today that they're releasing, BBC Audiobooks are releasing an audio version of the making of Doctor Who. I understand, the original paperback, we talked about it earlier on, the Piccolo edition that covered the Sea Devils, and then the second edition covered Robots. Years later. Yeah. So apparently this audio version is going to be a sort of combination of the two. But that's a snapshot. And I look back at this book. I've got several copies of that book, and I look back at it all the time. And that's a kind of snapshot of how television was made then. And we're now so many decades on, and this is why the idea of an audiobook of that really interests me, because it will hopefully bring it to life, not just the words on the page, but maybe it will bring extended life and understanding to such as the knowledge that you've just been explaining, JT, to television, how it was made then, the realities of it, that not to jettison the romance of it, but for us to be aware of the realities of it, and the fact that these people, they were kind of performing many miracles to get this on screen at all, and to keep it on screen for 10 years at this point.
Oh, totally. I mean, these people, everybody that was working at the BBC then, whatever show they were on, were producing entertainment, and they knew they were producing entertainment in whatever role they had to do, but they were pushing for the best. I'm sure all of them were pushing for the best that they could possibly do. But Doctor Who was notorious, of course, for only having 20p. So you had to get on with it, and it was to fill. I mean, Terence used to say all the time I used to love it when he used to say this. My main aim was to make sure they didn't show the test card at 5:05 on a Saturday night. It's just brilliant.
We've got a comment here from Mark Milford in the live chat on YouTube, who says, how good was The Three Doctors? We're still watching it 50 years later. That's how good it is. Yeah. And of course, we've talked a lot about John Pertwee, about Patrick Troughton, about William Hartnell, Katie Manning, Nick Courtney, all these people. But it's also, we have to acknowledge Barry Letts and Terence Dix, the producer and script editor throughout this time, who, it may have taken a while for the penny to drop that this was essential. They'd have been mad not to do this. but they got there in the end. Bob Baker and Dave Martin, the fantastic writers who put. I mean, I love the Claws of Axis from the year before, but this is bigger, better, funnier, and memorable, and did set that precedent. I think they'd have struggled to find any two writers with this kind of imagination and an understanding of one another to reach a story like that. Lenny Mayne, the director, I know very little about Lenny Mayne, but I know that he was Australian and that he was a real character. And obviously there was lots of challenges, as there always were, with making classic Doctor Who happen. But there it all is, and all coming together to create these 4 formidable, seminal episodes of our favourite TV show. Matt, you were going to say something a minute ago, mate, and I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, that's okay. I was interested, like with Patrick Troughton. You know that scene when they get him out of the time ethy sort of thing. I was just wondering, what's the episode that they use that from? Like,
I think that was actually
recorded.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I like that.
Yeah.
But it looks, I think possibly what you're thinking of is quite similar to sort of a shot from The Invasion.
Yeah, it looked like
So I
something.
think
Yeah,
that's probably what
it
you're
looked like
thinking
something
of.
from there, or the War Games or something. I
Yeah,
didn't know if they
it's-
took him out. I was just really interested as to what point they took him out.
Well, who knows what they took him out? I mean, that is a question in itself.
No, let's not go down that route.
Yeah, you're into canon discussions there.
That's another show.
The reason they recorded a special shot for it very quickly, Matt, is because they were paying Troughton, it was cheaper than actually paying him a repeat fee.
Wow. That's
Because
cool.
if they showed something from a previous episode, it was clearance rights, it was monies, it was like, so they just filmed something that looked reminiscent of his Doctor. And if you actually look, I don't know many people know, but the actual outfit that Patrick Troughton and William Hartnell wear in this are not their original ones.
No,
They're
it's
all
not.
hired in.
Yeah.
So you can actually tell that was a specially filmed part because he is in that outfit he's wearing for the 3 Doctors.
Also, those bubbly things, it's interesting. Some of the people that were in the bubbly things walked normally, and some of them bounced up and down, didn't they? It's like some of them bounced
noise,
and some of them just walking normally.
Do you think they've had this on the CV there, Ian, on the filmography?
Maybe. I don't know.
I love the eyes.
wearing-
I love the eyes. When you see the eyes, I think they're the fantastic effect in that whole costume. I think
Matt,
the
have you
eyes are
noticed that
fantastic.
they're wearing crash helmets as well, the guys that are in the costumes here, this behind the scenes section?
I have to say, I've got the character options figure, and I've never taken it out of the box, but I have seen one out of the box, and it's a brilliant action figure. It looks fabulous when you're like, oh, look at that, it looks good. So years ahead of their time.
Translucent?
Yeah.
Is it translucent?
No.
No.
It's on the thumbnail to this very video. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the cloister bell, and all that jazz. And if you've enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to have your say, something else springs to mind, another question, another memory, whatever else, you know what to do, where to do it.
Greetings, I am K9. If you have an inquiry and Siri or Alexa cannot help, maybe I can. Have you ever wondered if time travel is possible? Or what can a sonic screwdriver do? I may have the answers. Please leave your questions in the comments below.
We've got to remember as well that the 3 Doctors paid off for everybody that was in there, including Barry and Terence, who realised, as you were saying there just before, Dan, and I'll go on, we'll do this as the last sort of thing. But I want to mention the ratings for this thing. Episode 1, which was broadcast on the 30th of December, as Simon said earlier, 1972, got 9.6 million. And then it rose for episode 2 to 10.8 on the 6th of January, dropped slightly for episode 3 for 8.8 million on the 13th of January, but then episode 4 on the 20th of January, 11.9 million.
It's amazing.
Huge.
Amazing.
Different
time, though. It's a different time.
And of course, what's interesting is that right back at the beginning of when Barry Letts and Terence Dix took over, they were briefed to come up with a replacement show for Doctor Who because they were the powers that be on the 6th floor weren't expecting Doctor Who to continue beyond season 7. And yet there you are, as you say, JT, nearly 12 million viewers a couple of years later. They clearly knew what they were doing.
On Saturday Tea Time, it shows you, going right back to the beginning of the conversation on this show, the golden age of Doctor Who, of television. Doctor Who was very much there, and it was just about to get to this massive, huge thing, wasn't it? It was on that cusp, and it's just and also the Three Doctors was a gift for Barry and Terence because it allowed them to take the Doctor off Earth again. Yeah. Because we all know the resolution of the story. The Doctor's codes come back. He gets the dematerialization circuit back. And they wanted that so much. Terence and Barry really wanted to get the Earthbound stories gone, take the Doctor off. And here we go now. And you can just, in a sense, throughout that series, you can sense the change coming in the show. Because the Doctor...
Because they hadn't... I don't think they resented the situation that Derek Sherwin had left them in, but they were frustrated by it.
They didn't like it. They didn't like it.
They didn't like it at all. Yeah.
And to be honest, it's always amazed me that it took them so long to kick it out, because they could have certainly kicked it out the year before. Undoubtedly, they could have got rid of it the year before. They ran with it a lot longer than they needed to. Yeah. But I guess in a way it was simpler to, because by that point the show was on that kind of trajectory, and so fine, just let it go while they got their heads above water as much as anything.
I remember being on a convention where this came up. Some fans said, why did it take so long to get the Doctor off Earth again? And they said, well, we wanted to do it properly, and I thought it was a beautiful lie. Fair enough. We need to also, I think, as part of the Three Doctors, just give a little wink back to 3 actors that had actually played Time Lords in the show before. We had Roy Porcel playing the President, Clive Pollock coming back from the War Games, and Graham Lehman coming back from Colony in Space. I mean, I thought that, again, when you know these things and you've watched the Puppetry era up to this point, those kids who must have been watching live on that night, they must have gone, I know that. Oh, there's a time. Oh my God, that's from the Patrick Tennant. Oh,
I hadn't realised they were the same guys.
Yeah.
I learned something new about this all the time.
The same characters, and intentionally done by Terence especially, to say, right, we need those 3 back, so there's the continuity. It's like their costumes are similar to the ones in the War Games, isn't it? The last time we see that version. Yes. Lovely. Absolutely lovely.
That's awesome. Congratulations, says Barry Jones. I'm not sure what he's congratulating us on, but I think we'll take that, gentlemen.
It's the Three Doctors show. That's what it is. Yeah, they did a great job.
People love the gel guards after all. Seems like
I love the gel guards, Jack. They're great.
Guard fans here.
You know what? If we have gel guards now, you get spaghetti versions of them, wouldn't you, in tins, and you get little jelly sweets of them now.
You get really good CGI versions. They do cracking CGI versions of them.
And Ian can have a lollipop. Yeah, definitely.
What exactly does antimatter look like when you recreate it? Honestly,
like a blobby thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another thing. Is this the first story as well where the Doctor eats jelly babies? Patrick Troughton's Doctor?
No, it is. Patrick does it in his era as well, doesn't he?
Does he? Oh, I don't know. So right, there's a question.
I've seen behind the scenes with the 5 Doctors where he offers John Pertwee a
but does he Patrick in his own is in the second Doctor? I might try and investigate that one, unless anybody in the chat knows the answer. I think that needs a bit of an investigation.
I think the jelly babies come up in Pat's. I'm sure there's one. I mean, it's hard to say because I've only read the Target novels, because none of his episodes are around really, but I'm sure there's something where it comes out, unless I'm getting it mixed up with the Target novel. But let us know, because I'm not bothering researching it.
I have to say that on reflection, having watched this again the other night, all in one night, I binged it, as I said earlier on. That's my confession. I've come to the same conclusion that Problem Being has here in the live chat. The Time Lords look best in the Three Doctors and the War Games.
They do.
I like the high collars from the Deadly Assassin upwards. I appreciate that. I think it's a lovely design. But my personal favourite is the way they look in the Three Doctors. I've made my decision. I'm quite surprised by it, Matt, but I don't know why it is, but I've always preferred them, and even the sets and everything.
I just love the fact that they have a little bit of an emotion, but they're not like completely characteristic, and they're more alien in these. You know, it's like a totally different. It's off another different. It's on a different planet. You know, so it's. I just love this version of them, when I've always thought of Time Lords as ethereal rather than a government sort of character.
Really funny because when you watch the Three Doctors, you don't realize there's nice little tiny bits that just goes over your head. Like when Troughton goes, "We'll toss for it," and he just goes, "Yes, you lost." You know what I mean? It's so brilliant, isn't it? And he tries it again. He tries it again, doesn't he? And what's his name? Catches the coin. You're going to do that to me. Okay. Really
I can answer your Jelly Baby question. I can answer the Jelly Baby question. Indeed, Jelly Babies do appear in the Patrick Troughton era. The Dominators. Apparently, Patrick Troughton eats a Jelly Baby sitting in the travel capsule while he's waiting, spending his time, eats a Jelly Baby. The Three Doctors is only the second appearance of Jelly Babies, though.
That would explain that, because we've all seen the Dominators and we probably all fell asleep during the Dominators.
Yeah,
but
right. So
easily to be forgotten.
It's easy to miss.
The trick that what's his name does that John Pertwee does with the pencil, and then he turns it into a flower.
It's brilliant.
He wants to show off his magic.
Absolutely brilliant. I'm sorry.
One of my favourite bits that John does there, because it's slightly out of Doctor for him, really, in a sense, but he plays it as his Doctor. If that makes any sense at all when we're talking about Doctors. It's the bit at the beginning where the brig says, "Right, is there anything I can do?" And he says, "Yes, pass me a silicon rod," and it goes down the line.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that moment as well.
That's what I'm saying.
So given the fact as he is the one Ian mentioned and that one, and they always say, Simon, we were talking about that, it was a dead stop at 7 o'clock and it was so strict. They must have really loved playing these characters to work on little bits like that, because they didn't have to do stuff like that. I doubt that it would have been in the script. As funny as Bob and Dave were in their writing, that would have been broken down in rehearsal, JT.
It's very hard to say because I never got to see the original draft of the script. I mean, they did have a wicked sense of humor, but with Terence's revamping of that script because of the necessity of having to do it, it's a case of what would have been there originally, what lines would have been original. I mean, I was 99% would have been Bob and Dave, but with the humor bits about the Doctor, I don't know. You'd have to compare it to the Claws of Axos and the mutants and all the other gorgeous, the Invisible Enemy, all those wonderful things. So it's hard to say, isn't it?
That's why I always say that John Pertwee is the best, because there's so many bits in this that says John Pertwee is far superior than Patrick one.
Well,
where what's his name is telling them to take them away. Patrick's got his hands up, and John Pertwee's just walking.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
He's
really terrified.
He's got his hands. John Pertwee's Doctor's got his hands still in his pockets.
Exactly,
They're perched in his pockets.
He's awesome.
But that's beautiful. It shows the different incarnations. They are different.
Yeah.
I think what
it does, we get that again with Colin's Doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
I think what it does show. What it does show is that we talked earlier on about how John Pertwee wasn't that pleased necessarily about other Doctors coming into his show. And whatever happens, this is very much a John Pertwee show. For all the brilliance of Patrick Troughton and William Hartnell that we talked about, you're never in any doubt whatsoever that you are watching a John Pertwee show. He is the star of the show. Yeah. There's no doubt about that, and he never lets you forget that. There's a really interesting thing that I discovered while doing the diary that I forgot to mention, which is that apparently, again, Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee had a little bit of a run-in during studio recording, because apparently John Pertwee kept moving Stephen Thorne so that the shot favoured John Pertwee instead of Stephen Thorne. And apparently that didn't go down very well with Patrick Troughton. He thought that was very unprofessional. That's the kind of thing Pertwee would do. He would move Stephen Thorne so he could get in shot better.
I'm inclined to believe that completely, because it is,
it is his show.
Also, I remember watching this. I remember being really scared when Pertwee took on that monster in his mind. When he was flipping him around and stuff like that.
It's the dark corner of my mind.
Scary. That's so scary. That monster.
I don't know what he's talking about, but it sounds scary as fuck.
He is quite scary.
That was about Karate Fever back then, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it's Enter the Dragon. We talked about at the top of the show.
That would have been filmed at the same time. I mean, it was the Action Man Pertwee. That's what his whole era was about, and keeping John amused enough to keep him there. He had to have all these extra elements, didn't he? Because that's what he wanted. He wanted to be that sort of action hero, and he damn well got it in practically every story.
Yeah,
talking about keeping them there. Several people have said, just listening to this, they're going to go off and watch the Three Doctors, watch it or buy it or do whatever they can. I understand it's on BritBox, so pretty much anybody can watch it watch it there if you've got BritBox. Obviously, it's available on physical media, on DVD, and on
physical
Blu-ray.
media.
Yes, physical media only.
Support the physical media.
Unedited.
This is a seminal Doctor Who story. Whichever way you look at it, whatever you think about these occasions, why would you be watching this show if you weren't up for it, if you didn't appreciate these things for what they are and why they were put together? That in many respects they were put together for the fans, to reward the fans, I suppose, and to just give a little bit back, and obviously to guarantee that the occasion, that special 10th anniversary, was marked. That birthday, even though they couldn't possibly have known that we'd still be watching this 50 years later, let alone the very first stories. It's there, it's set in stone, and this story is absolutely essential. I would recommend it to absolutely anybody.
Oh, my giddy aunt.
Yes, I think we've got to wrap up with, before we get to our hot drink and maybe a tart or two, tart, I mean, everybody, let's look at a couple of pretty pictures that are related to the Three Doctors. First of all, this one we talked to a few weeks ago, Simon, and here is his take on the Three Doctors. This is Colin Howard, favourite artist Colin Howard. This is his take on this story. Again, Pertwee is very firmly where Pertwee should be, where he would have wanted to be. But the other elements have been played with quite nicely, I think.
God, that's superb. And the lighting that he's got on Omega there is just absolutely perfect, because that's just exactly how Omega looked in the show. And just that red lighting on the sides just really makes him look 3D. Fantastic piece of artwork, that. Lovely. Love it. And he's put a gel guard on. Well done, Colin. Thank you for putting the gel guard on.
One of the things I love about Colin's work is the attention to detail. I think him being a fan, he puts in like that. You were saying earlier on, JT, about your conversations with people like Bob, and when you go into your fan mode, they kind of switch off or whatever. Think, oh, he's off.
Yeah, you have to be careful.
But Colin's sort of one of us, and he gets it, doesn't he? He's
the only thing that gets me is the claw. Now, it's really the placement of the claw. I mean, I can't see it within. It's not. I'm not having a go at the artist, by the way. It's the actual. When I was actually watching it, I was like, "Oh, they've got a claw," and I'm like, "Where the hell did that come from?" And I'm like, I'm just worried about where it was actually. Yeah, but it just suddenly appeared, and it wasn't actually didn't look like it was a part of the character. So I was like, oh, where is that coming from?
let me tell you this, Matt. He says about to name drop in one of his famous name dropping things. I've actually seen. I'll probably get into trouble for saying this again. I've actually seen the redesign of the gel guards.
What redesign? What do you mean the redesign?
You can tell us later. You can tell us later.
Okay.
We don't want our JT smited, do we? Let's have a look at another piece of artwork. How about this one from the incredible Daryl Joyce? I love Daryl's work, and here is a more landscape take on the Three Doctors.
So beautiful.
Love it.
It's lovely. Yeah. I can see that on my my living room wall.
Yeah. I love the fact that he's got the Pertwee title sequence and the just ghosting in the background as well. That's fantastic. Love it.
Yeah, nice. John's pretty prevalent in that picture, isn't he?
Yeah, again.
Yeah.
It's it. He's given them a blue CSO fringe as well, hasn't he?
I was about to say that. I love the blue key line there that picks around every little detail. Obviously, hold the central image together.
I love how the title sequence is in put into that. Right at the background. I just love that. It's awesome.
Yeah. Daryl has been working his way through the classic series and doing lots of little portraits on specifically focusing on the TARDIS and the various places that it materializes. But you can find, I think he does prints of some of these larger pieces of work with actual characters in there. God, I'm just looking at the work that's gone into those faces. Just beautiful stuff.
Do we know, is that physical art or is it digital, Dan? Do we know?
It is a mixture of the two.
Isn't it? Yeah, I mean, look at Katie there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. I love Katie.
He has taken to mixing media, Daryl, lately, using very electronic devices. Yeah, so it's a combination of the things. Colin Howard is also experimenting too with digital. So
that kind of
with
stuff
great
should
results.
be up in Forbidden Planet down the West End and stuff like that.
Shouldn't it?
Yeah,
it should. As ever here,
should
we
employ a lot
off.
of fans. I'm sorry.
As ever here, we're rounding off with a look through the view screen, a regular eye in search of the prettiest pictures from out there in the Whooniverse and the weirdest ideas, because there's always weird ideas that inspire artists and creatives. And this is a whole corner to Doctor Who fandom that I didn't really know existed. I don't know why I'm so surprised, because we all know action figure collectors. I've got quite a lot myself. I know you have too, JT, and Matt, certainly. And the Rabbi from another planet, he's got hundreds of the damn things. But this is by Philip Lawrence, and this is an action figure theatre set of the Doctor's laboratory from Unit HQ in this story. And I mean, I'm just really impressed by anybody who put this sort of stuff together, Simon. I mean, the attention to detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's just geeky, isn't it? It's geeky, and that's why we love it. Let's be honest.
I can imagine cutting this out of the back of a cereal box in 1973.
If this was my house, I'd definitely have roundels around in my room.
These are brilliant. These take me back. I used to make sets out of cardboard boxes, three-wall sets out of cardboard boxes, and then decorate them all. And I used to do various TARDIS console rooms and then various elements to put my Dennis Fisher, Tom Baker doll in, you know. So these sort of things are wonderful. You know, it's just so lovely to see all these.
And there is
stuff. They're really, really good.
And there's just something really wonderful about the unit lab. I always love the stories with the unit lab in it. I don't know, something very homely about it. I know Barry Letson didn't like it. I loved it.
It's wonderful when it gets cut in half. The way that they do it, I just love it. You know, when it all pieces get taken out of it. I love it.
Literally cut in half, doesn't it?
Yeah. And
I love it when unit change buildings, because you always know, because the Doctor's lab's different.
Yes. Yeah. And the Doctor's lab seems to be different in every single story anyway, but that's part of the charm of it.
Maybe use Time Lord technology to use a chameleon circuit on it. But isn't it funny in the Three Doctors as well, when you see the outside, when Joe and John come up in the Bessie, and they have a top secret sign saying this place is secret.
Yeah, well, I love the fact that the Brigadier actually has a go at the Professor, because he talks about
Liberty Hall.
Liberty Hall!
Now, that's a saying you don't hear anymore these days, and there's various reasons for that when you look at our politicians, I guess.
It's another great line, and so is the one that's the Brigadier's computer. And we do see it in this lab, of course, before it gets taken through the black hole there. And the Brigadier's computer, it's not a laptop or anything like that, Ian. It's an enormous cabinet with the two spinning reels there. And you think, God, that was a computer.
I remember that.
That was state of the art, Dan.
It was the Master's stories in, so it's quite good.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, we haven't even mentioned Chroma. Somebody mentioned Chroma earlier on in the chat. We haven't even mentioned the Chroma line.
It's been in the chat so many times. I've just thrown it up on screen.
You weren't here, though.
How can we've done the whole program without talking for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour about the Chroma line? It's just genius.
We did mention it, but you were around.
Oh, I disappeared. I disappeared.
We mentioned that it was ad-libbed. Yes.
Ad-libbed by Nick.
Have them in stores by Christmas, advises Mark Milford for these action figure sets. Get in touch with Philip Lawrence. He puts these up on Twitter. I think he's got an Instagram account too. So go and say hi to Philip. And I think the idea is that you can get high quality PDFs or
they're including them now in the actual packaging for the action figures and that too.
No, they're not.
You can't throw them out.
They've stopped that. They're not doing that now. Yeah.
Well, that's probably a good thing, JT, because I've got too many boxes.
Yeah. I think that we can't possibly end this show on the Three Doctors and specifically the gallery without me putting my teeth in and a last look at this incredible piece of artwork. We talked about it earlier on. Won't do any harm to have another look at Chris Achilleos' classic picture there, his illustration from the Target book cover that was also put out as this print, and we can see the full burst aloft Omega's head there. Very, very 1970s and very, very Chris Achilleos, unmistakable, and the perfect image to sum up not just this story, but I think the entirety of this time in Doctor Who history. It all comes together in this piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a cracking piece of artwork. As I say earlier, it's got so much drama in it. It's got such a 3D feel to it with those hands really, really reaching out. And I know the hands are copied. We all know the hands are copied. But as Bowie always used to say, there's nothing wrong with copying if you copy from the best. And so it's fine. Chris gets away with it. And
sometimes your deadlines are so tight that you just have to go.
Okay. To be honest, Matt, I'm a massive fan of Jack Kirby's, and he got to meet him, and they laughed about that together because Chris told us about it.
To be honest, as well, none of us knew that for decades.
No, you're right.
We didn't know that. Marvel was never a big thing over here in those days. You could get the odd comic, but it was just a comic.
To be fair, Marvel comics have been taking a lot of stuff from the Brazilian comics for a long time. They're comic covers.
Also, this is one of the very first crossovers, isn't it?
In what way?
It's not a crossover as such because it's.
Yeah, I know, but it's kind of like one of the very
show.
first, isn't it? Let's face it.
It was certainly the first time that. But Doctor Who was unique because you didn't really. Even today, you don't have what is supposed to be the same character played by a different person. So Doctor Who's unique in that style. So to bring them all together, it was certainly special. But it has created this whole myth now and demand from fans every 10 years, hasn't it? God help them in 20 years' time. Jesus.
Well, Star Trek copied it.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you just reminded me when
what you call it, the Cybermen as well, didn't they? So they copied.
They
had a character in what is it? In I can't remember which show. It was Deep Space Nine with the girl changed into someone else, but she was the same character. I can't remember.
Doctor Who for science fiction has actually laid down a lot of rules of science fiction of what you can do, which other shows have copied. So back to copying.
As always, if you're an artist, digital or traditional, or any artists out there that we haven't spoken about and got their work up on screen, let us know where we can find them in the comments section. Get in touch with us through our social media, Instagram and Twitter at Type42 Doctor Who, and drop us some links where we can find these people and send them our way because we'd love to talk about their work. We'd love to see, and we'd love to give it that extra exposure that we can here on Type 40 Live, particularly in the anniversary year here. We've been talking about the 10th anniversary story from 1973, The Three Doctors, all the way back then, starring Jean Pertwee, Patrick Troughton and William Hartnell. And we're anticipating what's to come later on in 2023 as the 60th anniversary dawns. Don't miss all our conversations here talking about it on Type 40 Live, all for the love of Doctor Who. So we've got our discussions on fandom itself, on living as a Doctor Who fan and sharing all those memories, as well as these event shows where we'll be looking at these big stories and big moments, the kind that puts smiles on our faces for well over 2.5 hours now. Thank you if you've been here this entire time. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the cloister bell to get your notifications. If you're out there on the podcatchers, make sure you're following us wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you never miss an edition of Type 40 Live or Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast. Lots more coming, we promise.
Let's do the key to time next.
Yeah.
And there could be a reason for that.
Dun, dun, dun. More Type 40 Live Doctor Who coming at you, same time and space. Don't forget to check you're still subscribed. Matt, thanks for your company. Good morning, I should say, rather than good night. Hope you have a good one.
Broken.
Morning.
Can't you hear the wattle birds out the back?
Morning has indeed broken. He's not in the black hole, but the rest of us are off to bed now. Thank you. Thanks for your company, Simon. The diary, fantastic as always. JT, it's great to have you back and in good voice too.
Thank you very much. Thanks for good night. Go to bed.
I keep looking over at you in that top, JT. I see the white collar. I think you've come as a vicar this time. You come as one of Rich Delgado's characters.
It's part of the jumper, I swear.
Ian David Diaz, as always, mate. Great to have you aboard. Obviously, you were there in the 70s. You're a very, very wee boy, I know, but you're a child of the 70s, aren't you? And I knew you'd have lots to share. And a big Pertwee fan. And let us know what you think of this classic Doctor Who story in the comments section too. And you can reach out to us through the social media and the podcast and the playlist there, all there too. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40 Live. You enjoy your weekend. We'll speak to you all again soon. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.